Chapter 17 Naruto flashed straight to his parents' home. He needed something to calm down, something to focus on. His mind was in a haze, with all his rational thoughts and logic buried beneath a storm of emotions he could make no sense out of. This was the first time he was feeling something like this, and his gut instinct was understandably confused. Fortunately, he had Kurama to talk some sense into him. Naruto. Calm down. Take it slowly, step by step. He rumbled in a calm manner, trying to work the panic out of Naruto's system by pushing some of his yang chakra through. He could feel Naruto trying to think this through logically, as he had done with every situation before. Naruto registered Kurama's shouts and upon hearing the annoyance in his voice, he forcefully shook his head. He took deep breaths, letting each one out slowly. It took him over 5 minutes to calm down enough so he could listen to Kurama. He slowly sat down in the living room sofa, right in front of his parents' portrait. He put his chin on top of his joint hands and listened. Alright, I'm calm now, sorry about that. I just didn't know what to do, he said in a neutral tone, with only a hint of confusion in it. Kurama scoffed, as you should be. I really don't see what's there to panic about. You should be jumping in ecstasy instead, having finally had your first kiss with a girl. Naruto frowned a bit, maybe you're right. However, even if I kissed her, she is going to be my enemy on the day of the finals. I don't know what I would do. As a shinobi of the leaf, it is my sworn duty to destroy the enemies of the leaf. However, I know that I won't be able to bring myself to kill Temari. And I can't even imagine the treatment a prisoner of Konoha gets. Kurama raised an eyebrow. What you need to do, is slow down. It is not up to you to decide what happens to them. That's the job of the Hokage. Your job is to simply stop them from completing their mission, by any means necessary. Naruto thought about it, weighing Kurama's words intensely. He was right, he simply had to stop the sand from achieving their goal. He figured that he might have to take some lives on the day of the finals, but he could choose to spare some. He got up, his keen mind slowly working out the various possibilities and scenarios as he made his way to the simulation. He already knew that Gaara was the biggest part of the opposition's plan, so he would have to neutralize him by any means. If he could stop Gaara, there is no other trump card that he could think of that Suna can fall back on. He could choose to spare Temari, as she can't do anything on her own. Her other brother was easy to handle as well. Based on his observations, Kankuro was a skilled puppeteer, but he was also a bit of an idiot. Both were a very small part of the entire invasion, the pawns on the chessboard. He removed his resistance seals and set the simulation to level 6. He stepped inside the room and activated the simulation with the seal sequence. As his opponent formed in front of him, he settled into his stance, eyes steely. As soon as the command was given, he dashed forward in a flash step. I will figure out what to do. XXXXXXX. The fight was tough, easily the toughest that Naruto had ever fought. The bruises and sore muscles were the definite proof of that. He winced as he rolled his shoulder, trying to relax it a bit as he exited the room. He had given it his utmost effort from the beginning, trying to end it as quickly as possible. However, he wasn't surprised at all when he was parried blow for blow, jab for jab. Neither managed to gain the upper hand on the other for a whole of 15 minutes. Naruto could not hit his opponent, but he made sure that his opponent couldn't hit him either. It soon became clear that he won't be able to gain the upper hand if he continued like this, so he activated the blazing hands technique. At first, it looked like he had gained a slight advantage, but he was forced onto the defensive when his opponent copied the blazing hands and used it against him just as effectively. Naruto absently fingered the small, burnt hole in his jacket as he walked up the basement. The blazing hands had caught him off guard for a moment, which is why there was a burnt hole. But he had managed to put up a successful defense, all the while trying to think up of something that would give him an edge in the fight. The fact that there was no pattern to identify did not help at all. It all came down to this: The only way he was beating this opponent was by catching him off guard, and capitalizing on that hard and fast, give the opponent no time to recover or think up of a strategy. However, it had to be something completely new. Something totally out of the box. It did not escape his observation that the moves he fought in the previous level did not work on the next. So he waited, all the while defending himself from his opponent. It took him the better part of 20 minutes to think up of something that even remotely had a chance of working. Blazing hands was somewhat based on the tree walking exercise. You have to maintain a constant amount of chakra on your hands or feet. However, instead of it being normal chakra, it has to be Kaden. Kaden was fire, and fire was weak to water, and vice versa. With this in mind, Naruto improvised. Instead of maintaining Kaden chakra, he changed the nature to Sweden. It wasn't difficult at all, if he didn't count the constant attacking on his person. It was no surprise that the blazing hands technique of his opponent was neutralized. But water nature chakra had no offensive capability in taijutsu. But his goal was something else entirely. He maintained the change for only 10 seconds, after which he switched back to Kaden. He smirked when he saw his attacks getting neutralized, the same way he neutralized them. His opponent was using Sweden to counter his blazing hands. This was the chance he was waiting for. Without a moment of waste, he had flipped away and charged back. He used the potential of his danger sense to the maximum, slowing down his perception, waiting for the exact moment to strike. When his punch towards the stomach was predictably blocked by a fist, he struck. Red lightning danced across the body of his opponent, sending his electrical impulses into overdrive and spasming his muscles. Naruto had gathered a small amount of his Raiden chakra in his punch. And since the opponent was using Sweden to counter blazing hands, the water only boosted the effect of electricity on his body. Naruto seized his chance. He would have to finish this in one move, otherwise he risked giving his opponent a chance to adapt. He backflipped, enforcing his right heel with chakra to amplify the damage. His opponent went flying in the air, and Naruto smirked when he heard the telltale sound of a bone cracking. But he didn't stop his movements. He jumped a bit and spun counterclockwise, timing his jump such that his left foot made a painful contact with the opponent's gut, sending him flying back. His back struck the wall hard, his head bumping back as well due to momentum. But Naruto was already flash-stepping forward as soon as his kick had ended. He had gathered a large amount of lightning in his fist, making tiny sparks go off in random directions. He struck his fist right in the chest where the heart is. It went right through it, emerging on the other side. The Raiden chakra burned away any blood that would have gathered on the fist, if it were a real opponent. As it wasn't, the simulation ended, signifying his victory. The sheer amount of lightning in his hand had given him a high amount of piercing power. The power to cut through almost anything. Naruto did not know, but he had unintentionally recreated something similar to the Chidori, the technique that Kakashi was infamous for. No wonder he didn't get back up, he thought as he prepared to flash away. The simulation had ended after that. His purpose was achieved, he had managed to distract himself from the whirlpool of panic he was going through. Now that his mind was focused enough, he could logically think this through on what he would do on the day of the invasion. And he had decided what he would do. For now, he needed to rest. He had an invasion to prepare for. XXXXXXX Naruto was sleeping comfortably, a peaceful smile on his face. The sun peeked over the horizon slowly, and as soon as the first rays of the sun touched his face, his eyes fluttered open. He blinked his eyes several times to clear the sleep out of them. He then put his hands behind his head and just stared at the ceiling, attempting to piece together the facts he knew. Okay, here are the facts. Orochimaru attacked us in the second phase, making it clear that he is after Sasuke for some reason. From what I learnt from Tamari, the Sand and the Sound are planning a combined invasion on the Leaf on the day of the finals. So it's not just that the Sand and the Sound shinobi will be fighting each other, but the Cage will fight as well. Gigi is up against the Cage, and possibly Orochimaru as well. That Snake just want to see the Leaf destroyed, given that he was denied the title of the Yondaime by Gigi. The fact that Gigi only cemented the fact that he would never become Hokage by declaring him a missing nin is only the icing on the cake. He wants to see the Leaf utterly destroyed. Naruto frowned heavily at his thoughts. The Leaf was in a very bad situation. He knew that Gigi must have organized his forces accordingly upon learning of the invasion 2 days ago, so he only needed to worry about himself. It was finally time to cut loose. He was ready to show the world who he really is. Though it will be amusing to see whether the world is ready to know who I really am, Naruto smirked. He completed his morning rituals and was waiting for his clone to finish making breakfast. Today he would be resting entirely, so he could fight in peak condition tomorrow. Which means he had ample amount of time to come up with a plan on how to deal with Gaara. He doubted it was simple enough to get close to Gaara to apply the 5 elements seal, for his absolute defense was nothing to laugh at. The clone was grumbling about slave drivers when he served breakfast to Naruto. Naruto proceeded to dispel the clone while he ate the pancakes. He began thinking of ways to beat Gaara as he slowly ate his breakfast. Taijutsu was out of the question, if what Gaara did to Lee was anything to go by. Genjutsu was a useless option to use against a Jinchuriki, for the beast inside them would release the illusion for them. That left ninjutsu and fuinjutsu. Gaara primarily used sand, which was a glaring weakness for Naruto to exploit. Naruto knew how well Gaara could control his sand, but he doubted he could control it well enough when it got soaked in water. Wet sand was heavy. Fire was only good to use if it was hot enough to turn the sand to glass. He could use lightning, but he preferred if it didn't come to that. He would douse Gaara in so much water he would be hard-pressed to find enough sand that he could control. Fuinjutsu was something he could use to a great effect. A chakra absorption barrier would effectively trap and drain Gaara of his chakra until he dropped unconscious. But that presented another problem. Kurama had told him that the moment Gaara falls asleep, Shukaku would seize control and get free. So he would have to deal with a Biju. Thank God for the fox summons, he thought as he washed his plates. He dried them and went back to his room. Gazing in the mirror, he saw his hair and sighed wistfully. A second later, a clone popped into existence, already knowing what to do. He picked up a blade and scissors, and set about to cutting the original's hair. Tears of regret flowed out from his eyes. Why are you cutting your hair, Prime? It is such fine hair. Naruto turned in confusion, why are you complaining? The clone scowled, I know what you want to do with your hair, and I say it's idiotic because we would look like idiots. Naruto snorted, who says you have an option? The clone grumbled as he set to cutting the hair, while Naruto remained on guard, ready to dispel the clone in case he tried to shave him bald. 15 minutes later, Naruto gazed at himself in the mirror, smiling as he saw his new hairstyle. He even had his whiskers removed, for patches of hair, with a pattern that he had, hardly looked good on anyone. He had cut his ponytail, causing his hair to fall around and making 2 jaw-length, spiky ear tails on either sides of his head. He experimentally lifted his right hand and spiked his head forwards. He smiled when the hair seemed to actually spike forwards and stay like that. People are going to get a heart attack tomorrow, he smirked. He went into the bathroom and took a quick shower. I have to prepare some backup for Gigi, for he may have to face the Kazekage and Orochimaru at the same time, he thought as he wiped himself dry. What do you have in mind? The sudden deep baritone caused him to blink once. About time you woke up. I was beginning to get worried when you didn't respond to my thinking earlier. Kurama scoffed, you're about 10,000 years too young to worry about me. Anyways, what do you have in mind? Putting on his clothes, he scoffed in return and replied, I'm only a genin. I can only prepare a few hundred shadow clones, nothing else. Kurama thought for a few moments and said, you know, you underestimate your shadow clones. Don't forget, you are a decently skilled mortal of your age. He gracefully ignored the snort from his host, and as such, shadow clones of your caliber can act as a great support for anyone. If you say so, Naruto absently replied as he dressed up as usual. He looked at his hair in the mirror, noting the way in which it formed a spiky mess on his head. He arranged it so it was spiked forward on top of his head. He wondered what to do about his ear tails. He knew that his father too, had jaw-length bangs on either sides of his head. He could replicate that, but he really didn't want his hair sticking around his face if it got wet with water. He could tie the bangs under his headband, but then it would still stick randomly when wet. What to do, what to do, what to do. It's quite rare to see someone like you, who never pays attention to irrelevant things, fussing over your hair, Kurama slyly commented. Naruto scowled, it's a relevant concern, okay. And when did I ask for your opinion on this anyways? You didn't, I was simply stating a fact, the reply was swiftly delivered. Anyways, I have something that you can try. A bit old style, but you might do some justice to it. 5 minutes later, Naruto was looking over his new hairstyle. You know Kurama, this actually looks good on me. You do have good advice sometimes. The beast snarled in annoyance, you sure have some nerve, making fun of me like that. Naruto smirked but said nothing, further aggravating the biju within. He had tied his bangs in the middle with bandages, and then tied his headband over the bangs. He has Ashura's hairstyle. Search for Naruto Ashura hairstyle, he grabbed 2 blank scrolls and his sealing supplies. He felt for the marker he had left on the training spot where Jiraiya trained for the last 3 weeks. He was gone in a flash. Naruto appeared in the clearing, spreading out his senses and confirming if he was truly alone or not. When he had confirmed, he sat down and opened one of the scrolls. Taking out his brush and ink, he started writing seals for a prisoner containment scroll, with a slight alteration. In just under a minute, he had completed writing down the sealing sequence. He inspected it for any mistakes, then nodded upon finding none. Standing up, he made a half-ram. Around 200 shadow clones popped into existence. Alright, I want you divide into 2 groups of 100. Hi. For a second, Naruto feared that the sound of 200 people simultaneously shouting would draw someone's attention. He sensed for any foreign chakra signatures, but found none. Nonetheless, he had to do this quickly. It took him just under 10 minutes, but he managed to seal one group of clones into the scroll. Normally, a prisoner scroll is made for dead people who have no chakra. Also, it is made only for one person. So Naruto had to tweak the seals a bit so that the amount of chakra that was shaped into his 100 shadow clones did not get disturbed in any way. Also, he also tweaked the seals to allow solid, 100 constructs to safely get sealed. He exhaled a breath and did the same with the other 100. In 20 minutes, he had prepared a backup for himself and Gigi. Each backup worth 100 shadow clones. Alright, my work is done for today. Kurama, will my reserves be back to full by tomorrow? Easily. Leave it to me. I might even be able to expand them a bit. Naruto nodded, pleased with the development. All that was left, is to wait for tomorrow. XXXXXXX Tamari watched as her sensei paced their room in agitation. She glanced over to the other occupants of the room. Kankuro was cleaning his puppets, but kept a wary eye on their sensei, as if unnerved by his recent behavior. Gaara was just simply staring out of the window, arms crossed. No one knew what Gaara was thinking all the time, but it wasn't that hard to guess that he was bloodthirsty. All this time, there had been no one who Gaara had managed to kill, aside from the second phase of the exams. He was getting restless, and that spelled danger for all of them. Tamari thought back to the events of last night and had to vehemently fight off the blush that threatened to cover her entire face in red. That was her first kiss, and it couldn't have been any better. The way they had moved against each other was just mesmerizing. But then the memories of what had happened before their kiss came up, and Tamari found it easier to beat back the blush. She had planned to tell her sensei about her being ambushed, but was dumbfounded when Baki told her that they may have already been discovered. There was a loose end untied. Some Konoha shinobi had been spying on Baki's secret meeting with their ally. Baki had almost managed to finish him off, but the shinobi was rescued by someone. Someone so fast that all Baki had managed to see was a blonde blur and a blue flash. Which meant that Tamari didn't need to tell him if they had already been discovered. Baki was getting worried about the next day. The Cage had told him that they would be proceeding with the invasion no matter what. So far, the Konoha forces had not shown any signs that they knew about the invasion. But he had a bad feeling in his gut, and his entire shinobi career had told him to always trust his gut. He had no choice but to ignore it and follow the orders of his leader. XXXXXXX morning arrived sooner than Naruto thought. He got up, thinking about what would happen today. Today, 2 things were sure to happen. He was not just going to beat Neji, no, that would be too light of a punishment for what he did to Hinata. He would show him just how little fate meant to him. He was going to utterly humiliate the Hyuga. The chances of him winning were already in his favor with his lack of a chakra network, but he would put effort for Neji. The other thing was the invasion, something that scared Naruto a bit. So many people could die, and those people would not just be the enemies, but his comrades as well. He would do whatever he could to protect his comrades, even if it meant putting himself in the line of fire. He shook his head, wiping that line of thought immediately. He would fight like a shinobi today, fast, deceptive and ruthless. He already had his plan on how to beat Gaara, whether they crossed paths in the finals, or on the battlefield. Gaara would either lose, or die. He personally preferred if it didn't come to the second choice. Getting up, he quickly got ready. He checked and double-checked his hip pouches and holster, nodding when he saw they were fully stocked with what he needed. He put the backup scrolls in the pouches as well, reminding himself to give one of them to Gigi. He tied his headband around his head and tied his hair just like yesterday. He smirked when he saw he looked almost like a mini-me of his father. Today would be marked as the reveal of the legacy of Yondaime Hokage. XXXXXXX. The village was in a buzz, looking livelier than usual, many people noted. However, there was reason to be. Today was the day of the Chunin finals. People chatted happily as they made their way to the stadium, talking about who would win and who they would place their bets on. Of course, most of the buzz was about the last Uchiha. Many people were sure that the last Uchiha would no doubt emerge as the winner of the Chunin exams. It seemed as if the name of Uchiha automatically distinguished them as the strongest. Of course, people had reason to believe that as the last Uchiha was no other than the younger brother of Uchiha Itachi, the greatest prodigy to come out of the Uchiha clan. So, there was a lot of hope placed on youngest Uchiha to perform well. Many other people were rooting for the Hyuga genius, Hyuga Neji. The boy was hailed as the prodigy of the Hyuga clan, and there was no doubt as to how powerful the clan was. A prodigy of a powerful clan such as the Hyuga would no doubt be another favorable contender for the title of the winner of the Chunin exams. Naruto smirked as he made his way to the stadium, ensuring he was out of everyone's sight. It was important for him to not be seen by anyone. He wanted his entrance to be one worthy enough for the son of the Yondaime. As he made his way to the stadium, he paid close attention to what the people were saying. Most of them seemed damn sure of Sasuke's victory, while the others were in the favor of the Hyuga. Others were not even mentioned, which suited him just fine. The more he was ignored, more potent would be their guilt. He wanted the people of Konoha to know just who they were tormenting all this while. As the stadium came in sight, Naruto changed his route to arrive at the back of the stadium. Looking up, he saw the back wall of the stadium looming in front of him. There are still over 5 minutes before the announcements begin, he mused. He sat down to wait, and while he waited, he thought back to what Neji had said during the prelims. Flashback. Naruto watched in horror as Neji stood over the downed form of Hinata, who was twitching in pain. No one can defy fate, Hinata-sama. Fate deemed you to be weak, that is why you lost. To me. Flashback. End. Naruto frowned as he thought back to those words. The amount of scorn Neji held for his sister was unreal. He whispered, "Why do you believe in fate so much, Neji? Just what happened to you to believe in bullshit such as that?" He was shook out of his thoughts when his keen ears picked up an announcement, "All final contestants please get down in the arena." Naruto took a deep breath and stood up. This is it, he told himself. Looking up, he saw that the top of the wall was about 10 meters above the branch of the tree he was standing on. He made a clone, who charged his legs with chakra and jumped, easily vaulting over the wall. XXXXXXX. Shikamaru looked as lazy as usual, but he closely observed his opponents. His opponent, the girl from Sand, looked every bit confident of her victory. But there was a small hint of apprehension in her eyes, which darted around the arena anxiously. He didn't bother looking at Shino. The guy was as stoic as a stone, and never gave anything away. The glasses and high collar of his jacket only made it difficult to read him. The puppeteer from Sand was just like his sister, but unlike her, there was no anxiousness radiating from him. The last guy from Sand was the one that bothered Shikamaru the most. The redhead was dangerous, no doubt about that. Although his expression was stoic, it was betrayed by the sheer amount of bloodlust he could feel from the guy. He still remembered what happened to Lee in the prelims. Gaara had not hesitated one bit to kill him with his sand. He was a seasoned killer, one that Shikamaru doubted anyone wanted to cross. From the minute twitches that he could see, Shikamaru deduced that he was eager to get on with the fighting. He looked over to Neji, who was Naruto's opponent. Regarded as the rookie of the year of his batch, Neji was a proclaimed genius of the Hyuga, who were known for their deadly and unique taijutsu. While a formidable opponent, Shikamaru doubted he would win against Naruto. He knew that Naruto was powerful, but he had the feeling that Naruto had yet to show what he was fully capable of. Speaking of, he looked around, trying to find his blonde friend. Him and Sasuke, both of them were absent from the lineup, as well as the audience stands. If they didn't arrive right now. Troublesome, he muttered. The proctor, a different one from the prelims, was standing in front of their lineup. A lazy one, from what he could see. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Chunin exam finals. I am Shiranui Genma, the proctor of this stage. The matches will be as follows. Uzumaki Naruto vs Hyuga Neji, Uchiha Sasuke vs Sabaku no Gaara, Aburame Shino vs Sabaku no Kankuro and Sabaku no Tamari vs Nara Shikamaru. Turning his attention to the lineup, Genma continued, the rules are the same as preliminaries, however, whether you win or lose doesn't matter. Your promotion will be decided on the basis of your skill, your strategy and execution. Stan's Sakura looked worried as she tried to spot her two teammates. Ino, who was sitting next to her, said, where do you think are your teammates, Sakura? While she still believed Sasuke would win the finals, she had gained a healthy amount of respect for the blonde Uzumaki, ever since she suffered the humiliating defeat at his hands. The ease at which he handled her told her how pathetic she really was. Also, it was evident just how much he was holding back from absolutely thrashing her. Sakura shook her head worryingly. I don't know, where are you, Sasuke-kun, Naruto? A sound coming from above the finalists caught hers, as well as every person's attention. Arena the proctor was just about to speak some more when a sound above them caused everyone, including the audience and the cage, to look up. In a puff of smoke, a small object fell right in front of the assembled genin. It was revealed to be a kunai, but not just any kunai. A three-pronged kunai. There was a collective gasp among the audience when they recognized what it was. Genma had wide eyes as he stared at the kunai, being reminded of the only person in the entire nations who used to wield these. Before he could think anything else, a person appeared in a blue flash. A pin-drop silence washed over the entire stadium as everyone got a good look at the person. Cage Box Hiruzen stared in awe as the person was revealed to be just who he thought it would be. And Kami, he looked just like his father. Minato, you would be proud of who he's become. Beside him, Orochimaru was seething. His fists were hidden from view, so that no one could see that they were clenched tightly. Uzumaki Naruto, it is not possible for anyone to master the jutsu in just a month, which means you knew it well before, and you knowingly held back against me. Very bold. But then he smirked, if you weren't the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi, I would have marked you instead of Sasuke-kun. To have that jutsu in my arsenal, I would have been unstoppable. Everyone's eyes were at the point of bulging out when they saw the kunai used by their beloved Yondaime being thrown in the arena. Everyone had gasped collectively, and had jumped up on reflex when the person who had likely thrown the kunai had appeared. It couldn't be, it just couldn't be, were the thoughts of everyone. They were filled with disbelief, trying to deny what was right in front of their eyes. But no matter how much they wanted to, it was simply undeniable. Spiky blonde hair, which was no longer tied in a ponytail, but in a style that was painfully reminding them of a similar blonde. Two jaw-length spiky bangs, although tied beneath the headband and the bangs themselves tied around the middle, there was no mistaking just who the blonde Uzumaki resembled so much. He was almost a literal copy of Namikaze Minato, with only his hairstyle distinguishing from the famous Hokage. The Yondaime couldn't return from the dead, which left only one conclusion. To think that the demon container was also the son of the Yondaime. The crowd exploded in mutters, exclamations of, Yondaime, mostly drowning any other verbal exclamation. It was something that no one was expecting to see. No one knew that the Yondaime had a legacy, and now that they thought about it, it was right in front of their eyes all the time. Guilt began to creep into every Konoha villager about how they treated the boy, who was almost royalty considering just whose legacy he represented. Is that Naruto? He looks so hot. Ino cried out as she hungrily looked at Naruto. Then she closely looked at Naruto. While he had only changed his hairstyle, he closely resembled a person that was on the tip of her tongue. Sakura was beside herself as she gazed upon Naruto's new look with a slight blush. He looks almost as handsome as Sasuke-kun, if not more. Arena Naruto stood in a crouch, right hand grasping the handle of the kunai and eyes on the front, facing the genin assembled. He took in the expression of each of them. Shikamaru's narrowed gaze, Shino's raised eyebrows, Kenkiro's frown, Temari's appreciative but slightly guarded gaze, Neji's narrowed eyes but otherwise neutral expression. But what put him on guard most was Gaara. Pulling out the lodged kunai with a slight jerk, he slowly stood up, maintaining eye contact with Gaara. Gaara's mouth almost twisted into a manic smile, but it was so quick that Naruto would have missed it if he were not looking for it. He stood up to his full height, towering full 4 inches above him. Without breaking eye contact, both of them seemed to size each other up. It was as if along with them, their Biju were also looking each other through their eyes. A new feeling washed over the assembled group. It was as if at first, there was an existing sensation of a contest between themselves. Temari and Kankuro knew that Gaara was the strongest among the three of them, and the genin from Konoha knew Neji was the strongest among them. It was a clash between both the groups. But with Naruto's arrival, it seemed that the purpose of the clash went utterly void, for here was a genin whose aura seemed to say that he already knew he was the strongest among them. The feeling was unsettling. Uzumaki, Gaara whispered, though it perfectly conveyed his bloodlust. Naruto did not change his expression, prompting Gaara to continue, "Mother cries for your blood." Naruto merely lifted an eyebrow and said, "She's going to have to wait." He then proceeded to stand next to Shikamaru, who turned an annoyed expression to him. "You're a troublesome guy, have I ever told you that?" Naruto smirked but said nothing. Genma gazed at Naruto for a moment more, before turning his gaze and calling out, "Just to be clear, I'll say it one more time. The same rules apply as last time. Opponents continue to fight until one is either knocked out or unable to continue. I also reserve the right to stop the match when I see fit. With that said, the contestants of the first match will step forward. The others will proceed to the contestant stands to wait for their matches." Shikamaru patted Naruto on his shoulders and walked off to sit with the rest of the rookies. When the field cleared, it was just Neji, Naruto and Genma, who stood between the two fighters as the two sized each other up. "You should give up, Uzumaki. Fate has already decreed me to be the winner today." Neji broke the silence, informing Naruto as if what he said was fact, nothing more. Naruto smirked both at the squeals from the female audience and what he was about to say at him and replied, "Your eyes are said to be great, yet they can't even see that fate is not the proctor of this match, Genma-san is." Neji's eyes hardened. "Everything in life is set by fate, as is your defeat. But I can see you do not understand fate." Slipping into his stance, he continued, "Allow me to explain by demonstrating it to you." Genma knew an opportunity when he saw it, and he swung his hand down in a slicing motion. Hajime. Immediately jumping back, he made a half-ram seal. 8 clones popped into existence. "Go," he commanded. All of them moved in to engage. Neji did not seem alarmed at all. He calmly engaged the clones with controlled expertise, slowly but surely, dispatching them. Naruto observed that Neji's eyes never once moved in their sockets, always gazing forward. As the last of the clones was finished off, Neji was surprised a bit that another batch was already moving in to engage. But no matter, they would not win. Fate had decreed him to be the victor of this match. Stands, what is he doing, using Kage Bunshin against Neji? Asuma wondered, confused by Naruto's tactics. Alongside him, Kurenai and Guy also were wondering the same thing. If he knows the Hiraishin, he could have ended the match easily, so why isn't he? With Neji's Byakugan, any type of attack using clones wouldn't work because of his all-around vision, Guy put in his thoughts. Perhaps there is more to this match than just achieving victory, that we are not seeing. A few seats away, the head and the heiress of the Hyuga clan watched the match with impassive expressions. Hiyashi paid careful attention to the Uzumaki, who was intently studying Neji's fighting style. There was no doubt about it, Naruto was the son of his old friend, the Yondaime. Had he not known that Naruto knew that jutsu that made Namikaze Minato so known, he would have been in favor of Neji's victory. But now, he felt like Naruto was setting Neji up for something. Like a predator playing with its prey, before finishing it off. He would have told Hanabi about his assurance of Neji's victory, but that was before he realized just who Neji was facing. He wisely chose to keep quiet. Arena, there, Naruto mentally exclaimed as Neji finished off the fourth batch of shadow clones. He waited for Neji to get his breath back as he prepared himself, setting into his stance. He found out all he needed to fight this match on his terms. Neji finished off the last clone and faced the original, all the while mentally cursing. While it took much longer than he estimated, he was able to finish all of them off. But that wasn't what surprised him. The clones, along with the original, didn't seem to have any chakra network at all. The Hyuga clan's taijutsu was largely based on attacking the tenketsu in the chakra network, cutting off the flow of chakra where they struck. However, the revelation that Naruto did not have a chakra network almost made his taijutsu null and void. It was almost like he was fighting blind. Almost. Along with learning the locations of the tenketsu, the Hyuga also learned the locations of various pressure points. With the option of striking the tenketsu out, he only had pressure points to rely on. While not as many as the number of the tenketsu, there were enough for him to strike. He turned to the original, watching him settle into a strange stance. He settled into his, knowing that Uzumaki Naruto had given him yet another reason, along with being the son of the Yondaime, to believe that he was a very dangerous opponent. I presume you know that I am not a normal opponent by now, Naruto called out. Neji narrowed his eyes and deactivated them, indeed you are not. But that doesn't matter. Fate has spoken in my favor today, which is why you will lose. Naruto narrowed his eyes. If you insist on believing so much in fate, then allow me to show just how fragile the concept of fate is. With that, he moved. Almost everyone, including most of the Jonin in the stands, was perplexed as one moment Naruto was standing 10 feet away, and the next moment a foot was being barely blocked by the Hyuga. Many people thought that it was Hiraishin, however, when Neji was sent skidding back from the force of the kick, they realized that Naruto had moved so fast that the momentum had augmented the force behind the kick, causing Neji to go skidding backwards. But Naruto had only started. Neji had barely begun to think when Naruto attacked again. He was shocked at just how fast and ruthlessly he was forced onto the defensive. As he tried to block the attacks, Neji had thought that Naruto's fighting style was focused more on the strength of the attacks, rather than speed. He was promptly proved when he failed to hide his winces when he felt the force behind each of the attacks. He moved by instinct as he attempted to redirect the force behind Naruto's attacks. The speed behind his attacks was nothing to scoff at as well. While the strikes had impressive force behind them, they seemed to be augmented by the sheer speed that Naruto was using to strike. Son of the Yondaime indeed. Only years of training in the martial art of his family and developing his instincts allowed him to dodge his attacks. Even then, he was dodging and blocking by instinct only. That wasn't the only problem. His hands were feeling unusually hot. Neji's thought process resulted in a punch slipping past his guard, right into his left cheek, and he found himself flying backwards from the force of it. He prevented from landing on his back by twisting himself midair and landing on his feet. His hand came up to tenderly rub the surprisingly, slightly burnt area as he narrowed his eyes, trying to figure out just how was Naruto defying fate. Cage Box Hiruzen was thoroughly impressed when he saw Naruto engaging Neji in taijutsu. Usually, it was considered suicidal to engage a Hyuga in taijutsu, but it seemed Naruto had no such qualms. Not just that, but his taijutsu was effective enough to put a Hyuga on the defensive. And it seemed he added his own touch to it, if the small burn on Neji's face was anything to go by. Most unpredictable ninja indeed. He pulled out a notepad, which he had brought to write points on which each genin qualified for the position. He wrote down something and kept it aside. Your genin is quite impressive and bold, Hokage Dono. He must be very confident to engage a shinobi of the Hyuga clan in taijutsu, Orochimaru commented, playing his role as the supposed Kazekage. Hiruzen chuckled, I'm sure that this is only the beginning, Kazekage Dono. He will surprise us, of that I have no doubt. Mentally though, you don't give me the credit I deserve, Orochimaru. Don't think I don't know that it's you in those robes. The surprise was evident on the faces of the three Jonin. Not every day you see a prodigal Hyuga being bested by the supposed dead last, now revealed to be the son of their late Hokage, in taijutsu. Guy was crying, shouting something about Naruto's youth, with Lee vehemently agreeing with him. Kami, is this really what he is capable of? Ino whispered in amazement and slight fear. She was suddenly, infinitely grateful that Naruto hadn't gone full force in their spar that day. If he had, she would have really been dead. Naruto. Sakura whispered in awe as she watched her teammate best one of the Hyuga at their own game. It suddenly became clear just how utterly huge the gap between their skills was. She couldn't even begin to see his movements, that's how fast he was. The first attack alone would have taken her out of the fight. A few seats away, Hinata watched with a slight smile as Naruto held his own against her prodigal cousin. Naruto-kun. Kiba on the other hand, was shocked and almost jealous of the speed and skill Naruto was displaying. It made him think back to his own fight with the blonde, and he ruefully smiled at how easily he was beaten. He had grown up with Naruto, and if there was anything he could say for certain about the blonde, it was that Naruto never gave up. He could say without a doubt that Naruto had trained his ass off to reach where he is now. It sort of inspired him to become the same. After all, if Naruto could do it, why can't he? Arena Neji hid his wince as he kept his gaze on Naruto, slowly standing up. He evaluated on whatever he had experienced so far. There is no doubt that he is physically strong, almost on the same level as Lee. I'm willing to bet that he could withstand the amount of force he dishes in his attacks himself as well. And he is fast, unbelievably so. Nothing else would be expected of the son of the fastest shinobi to ever live, after all. I never knew that it was possible to have such impossibly fast reflexes. His fighting style is lethal, but in a way I have never seen before. Every fighting style has a focal point which it is based on. Gai-sensei's Goken is based on strength, Juken is based on precision. But his style seemingly incorporates strength, speed, flexibility and precision. It's as if he can switch to any one of them if one proves to be inadequate against one opponent. Not just that, his movements are bizarre. He seems to have mastered the way to perfectly switch from one set of movements to another, without hesitation. His hands also feel as if they are on fire, burning any area of contact. Fully standing up, he took deep breaths to center himself. I'll have to avoid his hands, no, pretty much his every blow. Am I getting to you, with that fragility of your so-called fate? Naruto asked, and no one missed the sarcasm in his voice. Neji chose to ignore that, and instead asked, how did you manage to burn my face? Naruto rose his eyebrow in a way that strongly reminded Neji of himself. He raised his eyebrows that way when his teammates seemed to suggest an utterly stupid idea. So that's how it feels to be on the receiving side of it. He felt quite stupid to be honest, and was a bit glad that he had a burn on his cheek, otherwise his blush would have been caught. What idiot reveals the secret of his or her technique, Baka? Naruto asked in a bored tone. Cage Box Hiruzen heartily laughed at the question. It was highly amusing when in his youth, his opponents seemed to spare him the thought process of trying to figure out their technique by revealing it on their own. It allowed him to create a counter-strategy quite easily. Instead of finishing him off, they seemed to choose to gloat about their techniques. What idiots. A very true question. Won't you agree, Kage Dono? Orochimaru forced out a chuckle, while he couldn't shake off the feeling that the old monkey knew it was him and was openly mocking him. I agree, Hokage Dono. Hiruzen smirked and turned back to watch what was turning out to be a highly entertaining match. So far, Naruto had only shown his superior prowess in taijutsu, and had yet to show something that qualified him for Chunin, except for keeping emotions under control. He had to keep his smirk from widening, for he was reminded of a younger Orochimaru, bragging about the secret behind the techniques he developed himself. What an idiot. Stans Kiba shared the amusement with his Hokage, for he was laughing as well. He never knew Naruto had it in him to mock others. Hinata was trying to hide her giggles behind her hand. It would not do if her father caught her laughing at Naruto calling her cousin an idiot. Sakura and Ino shared no such restraints, and were full out giggling. The Jonin had mixed reactions. Asuma had snorted and had to catch his smoking stick from flying onto the head of the person in front of him. Kurenai was stifling her giggles like her student, not wanting to offend Guy for laughing at his student. Guy had an entirely different response. Instead of being offended on behalf of his student, tears came from his eyes and he clenched his fist. What a hip response. No doubt, you have passed your coolness onto your student, my eternal rival Kakashi. Needless to say, he entirely ignored insult on Neji, choosing to focus on how hip and cool Naruto's response was. Arena Neji was barely keeping himself from turning red in embarrassment at all the giggles in the stadium that were aimed at him as a result of Naruto's comeback. Naruto was entirely amused by the giggles resounding in the stadium, but chose to keep it to himself. No need to embarrass him any further. Time to continue the fight, this time with a bit of misdirection. Neji was already worn out and trying to reduce the feeling of stupidity in himself, so when Naruto suddenly disappeared from in front of him, he was caught unawares. Naruto grinned as a solid kick connected to Neji's left shoulder, sending him flying away from him for the second time in the fight. He twisted and landed on feet, but was given no time to recover as he engaged the Uzumaki in taijutsu yet again. He activated his Byakugan this time, watching out for Naruto's no doubt, Kaden chakra enhanced hand strikes. But for some reason, Uzumaki's hands were lacking the chakra that was making them heated. So Neji jumped at the opportunity to block, rather than dodge, all the while trying to find an opening. He also deactivated his eyes to conserve chakra. He would endure the punishing force for a short while. Maybe he should taunt him a bit. You are not fighting with your chakra-coated strikes as you were doing before, Uzumaki. He smirked as he saw Naruto narrowing his eyes. It seems this is where fate draws the line for you using the technique. He was shocked however, when Naruto, instead of getting enraged like he wanted, snorted out loud. In a surprising maneuver, Naruto locked himself with Neji, holding him in place. As much as Neji tried, he would only move if he managed to overpower him. Yeah, not happening. Neji grunted as he tried to get out of the lock Uzumaki had put him in. But as much as he struggled, he could not move the limbs of the blonde. His face twisted in a snarl, and he locked eyes with Naruto, who had a neutral expression on his face. Whatever he was going to say was thrown out of the window at the blonde's words. Only a pansy like you would call misdirection is an act of fate. He saw it, but could do absolutely nothing to stop it. Futen. Repusho. Wind style. Gale Palm, a clone, who had appeared beside them without any hand seals which caused a gasp to resonate through the shinobi part of the crowd, had enough compressed air in his hands to cleanly blow Neji away almost 20 meters. Naruto had released him from the lock at the very last second. While the force was enough to send him flying, it lacked a damaging component. But instead of feeling relief, Neji only felt dread. He had a feeling that Uzumaki had planned something much worse for him. Unlike the previous times, Neji failed to add grace to his landing and as such, rolled toughly onto the ground. Remembering that Uzumaki would not likely give him time to recover, he quickly got up to his feet, just in time to see 4 shuriken converging on him with deadly accuracy. He jumped to the side to avoid them, but was surprised by the blonde, yet again. So he decided to switch to long-distance attacks. This is good for me, for I might be able to use this window to recover a bit. But that thought was thrown out of the window in the next moment. Naruto had predicted in a split second where Neji would land, after he avoided those shuriken. So, he had cleverly threw 3 kunai, wrapped with explosive tags of his own design, to that spot. Neji grit his teeth as the kunai came closer and closer. It seems I'll have to use that. Naruto watched as the kunai almost hit Neji. His eyebrows raised in surprise when Neji suddenly spun, so fast that he wasn't even visible anymore, and was covered in a dome of his own chakra. Hakusho Kaden. Naruto activated his exploding tags just as they reached Neji, and watched with a mix of curiosity and fascination that the dome of chakra spinning around Neji completely protected him from the resulting explosion. Stan's Hanabi turned to her father. "Tusama, isn't that?" "Yes," Hiyashi replied instantly. His own eyes were narrowed as he clenched his fists. Kaden is supposed to be the technique of the main house. How does Neji, a member of the branch house, know it so well? Arena Neji stopped spinning, and couldn't really hide the smugness from his voice as he saw the expression on Naruto's face. He could gloat later. Right now, he would capitalize on this small window of opportunity. No need to use the Byakugan, for he knew exactly where to strike. Naruto had immediately created 5 clones to scope out Neji's new technique and find a weakness, but his opponent's words momentarily gave him a pause. "You are now in the field of my divination," Neji ominously announced. Not wanting to give Neji the chance of using this technique, 2 of them shot forward to engage him. But this time, Neji was ready, his hands moving in a blur. 2 palms, 2 clones gone. 4 palms. Another 2 gone. 8 palms. The last one tried to shield himself. Futile effort. Even if you have no tenketsu, the physical damage from the strikes alone will send you down. 16 palms. Naruto grunted as the hand slammed into him with considerable speed. 32 palms. 64 palms. Naruto skid back as Neji finished his technique, breathing evenly. Because he chose to keep his Byakugan deactivated for the majority of the fight, he had more than enough chakra to keep going on. It was easy to ignore the physical pain when you train with people such as Gai-sensei. Naruto had blood dripping from his mouth. He went down on one knee, drawing gasps from the crowd. This was the first time he had taken any damage in this fight, and it was enough to send him on one knee. Looking at Neji, he asked in obvious pain, "I assume you were going for physical damage. If you couldn't find my tenketsu, weren't you?" Neji felt a sense of superiority as he looked down on Naruto. No one remained in fighting condition after getting hit by the 8 trigrams, 64 palm technique. You assume correctly. While you were formidable for some time, this is where this ends, Uzumaki. I told you before, fate has decreed that I will win today. Cage Box Orochimaru smiled under the veil, a most formidable technique of the Hyuga clan, Hokage Dono. I wonder if this is the end for the young Uzumaki. Hiruzen smiled as he wrote something down on the notepad. Don't worry, Kage Dono. Naruto won't go down this easily. Stands the Jonin had confused looks on their faces. Why did Neji do that? Couldn't he see it? Guy was rubbing his chin. I don't know what Neji was thinking when he did that, but it clearly didn't work the way he might have expected. While the news that Naruto didn't have a chakra network was quite staggering, they wanted to see how Neji would work his way around it. The genin on the other hand, were different parts worried and resigned. Kiba, Hinata, Sakura and Ino wore worried looks as they looked at Naruto. Naruto-kun. Hinata whispered in worry, knowing just how formidable the technique that Neji had used was. Even if Neji didn't have tenketsu to strike, the muscles that were struck would suffer considerable damage. What a technique, Ino whispered in awe as she looked at the kneeling form of Naruto. Naruto had completely dominated the fight from the beginning, but Neji had seemingly turned the tables with just one move. Get up, Naruto. Sakura was chanting in her mind, restraining from saying it out loud. Tenten on the other hand, just shook her head as if she already knew this was going to happen. While you were good Naruto, there is no way you can recover from this. Arena Naruto, despite being in pain, chuckled. Neji rose an eyebrow, what's so funny? Naruto looked up with mirth swimming in his eyes, and I told you, fate is very fragile. And he burst into smoke. Cheers erupted from the crowd as it was revealed that the Uzumaki had pulled a fast one on everyone, including Neji. The said genin cursed as he activated his Byakugan and looked around. He almost gasped when he found out where Naruto was, but wasn't able to react in time. Naruto burst from the ground behind him, a predatory grin on his face and body already in motion. Neji was able to angle his body so that his left shoulder took the hit instead of his head. But he winced as the already abused shoulder took another hit, and he was sent toppling away. Naruto brushed off some of the dirt as Neji let out a small groan of pain and frustration, standing up. Most people don't think to look down at the last second. Am I right? Neji said nothing as he gazed scornfully at the smirking blonde. You made the mistake of deactivating your eyes. If you hadn't, you might have noticed that I substituted with my clone at the last second. Your mistake also allowed me to hide without worry under the ground. Pretty good for misdirection and deception, don't you think? Neji grit his teeth. Even if you had substituted with your clone, a shadow clone gets dispelled after one hit. Naruto made a sound of mock realization. Oh, that? I reinforced it with chakra. It's really not that difficult. He then smirked in a way that sent shivers down Neji's spine. I've somewhat heard about your defensive technique. The ultimate defense of the Hyuga, isn't it? Neji said nothing, which was more than enough for an answer. Holding up 4 shuriken, he challenged, let's test that so-called ultimate defense, shall we? Cage Box, your genin is very ingenious, Hokage Dono. Hiruzen nodded, pride coursing through him at how well Naruto was handling himself. So far, Naruto had demonstrated skills that were already above the qualification level of Chunin. He wondered just how Naruto planned to break the ultimate defense of the Hyuga clan. Stands Kiba, Ino and Sakura had shouted in glee when Naruto had popped, the real Naruto kicking Neji away. Hinata had quietly cheered for Naruto, while Tenten was in a state of disbelief. While even Lee couldn't get up after Neji's technique, it was a whole another thing to avoid it successfully altogether. Arena the shuriken whizzed towards Neji, who jumped to the side to avoid them, opting to conserve chakra. He was stupefied, however, when he spotted a giant ball of fire making its way towards him, fast. Having no time to jump again, he was forced to resort to his defense. Kaden. Neji reached his maximum rotation speed just as the fireball reached him. The fireball crashed into the spinning dome of chakra, taking only 5 seconds to disperse, which was 4 seconds too late for Neji. It was hard to accurately keep track of your surroundings when you were spinning at a really high speed. So one moment Neji was inside the dome, the other moment Naruto was inside with him. Wait, what? This time, Neji didn't even have time to be fully surprised as he was punched in the face, hard. The sudden application of an external force disrupted the Kaden, and Neji was bodily thrown through the fireball. I'm really getting tired of being thrown like that, Neji lamented as he stood up once again, a bit burnt from going through the fireball. Stan Zasuma and Kurenai were gawking at the way Naruto broke the defensive technique. One moment he was standing outside the dome, the other moment they all saw him disappearing and appearing instantly inside the dome in a blue flash. Hiraishin, Guy whispered in awe. Even he had not found a way yet to break that defensive technique. But if the Hiraishin could surpass defenses with such amount of ease. It really was a terrifying technique. No wonder the Yondaime was so feared. Cage box, I really have no more words to describe how impressive that genin of yours is Hokage Dono. To learn and master the Yondaime's most feared technique at such a young age is no small feat, Kage complimented. Hiruzen smirked and nodded. That was a masterful use of the Hiraishin. Naruto must have marked Neji at the very first opportunity. Also, to be capable of using two elemental natures is very impressive, Orochimaru complimented. Hiruzen accepted the compliment on behalf of Naruto with a nod and a smirk. Arena Neji breathed heavily as he gazed at Naruto. He was down to just a quarter of his chakra reserves, while Naruto had yet to show any signs of fatigue. What he didn't know that Naruto's chakra reserves were so much larger. That he had only used a small drop of the entirety yet. How did I break your defense? Naruto helpfully finished it for him. When he saw him nod, he sighed. While I did say before that only idiots reveal their technique, it's no big secret as to the way I appeared inside with you. Reaching behind him, he pulled out his Hiraishin kunai, dangling it in his index finger. I'm sure you know what this is. He looked around, discreetly seeing that he had captured the attention of the entire audience. This is a kunai that was once used by my father, Namikaze Minato. Mutters rose in the crowd in response to the confirmation of their thoughts from before, but quickly silenced when Naruto continued. The Hiraishin no Jutsu is a space-time technique, a combination of ninjutsu and fuinjutsu. Basically, this formula here, he showed him his imprinted formula, acts as a beacon for me. Wherever this formula is, I can teleport there without any problem. That means, the reason I was able to get in there is because you already have a mark on you. Neji had never widened his eyes this much in his entire life. He desperately searched for the place where Naruto had placed his formula, and found it beneath his forearm. Never before had he been so outclassed in a fight. How had he failed to notice such a simple thing? Naruto spun the kunai, catching it in a reverse hold. The look on his face was almost as if set in stone. It was the same look the yellow flash gave to his enemies before killing them. I could have ended the fight the moment we engaged in taijutsu. In another scenario, if you would have been my enemy and not a comrade, you were dead the moment I put this mark on you. Silence rang in the entire statement as the cold truth of the words hit each person. It was only now that they realized just how truly dangerous and lethal the Yondaime's use of this jutsu was. It was basically as if you were marked by death. If you had this mark, there was no escape for you. Then why didn't you? Naruto raised an eyebrow, and put the kunai back in his pouch. Tell me something, Neji. Why do you believe in fate so much? What gives you the excuse to claim that everything is fated to be? Neji looked surprised for a moment, but then his eyes hardened. He reached for his headband and removed it. Because of this, he said, pointing to a green seal on his forehead. It was a cross in the middle, with hooks on either side of the cross. The bird cage seal is given to the branch house members of the Hyuga clan by the main house members. While it may seem that both the houses are family, it is a lie. The cold reality is that the branch house members only act as servants to the main house, he explained. Naruto didn't attack him when Neji closed his eyes, instead opting to hear his story out. The seal is given to the branch house members to protect our prized bloodline from falling into our enemies' hands. After the death of a house member, the seal activates and seals the abilities of Byakugan. By that, I mean this seal binds us until death. A destiny from which we cannot escape. Neji told him about the Hyuga incident which happened 8 years ago. How Hinata was almost kidnapped by the ambassador from Kumogakure no Sato. How the village had demanded the death of Hiyashi Hyuga as compensation, how his father was offered instead. Till the end of the explanation, Naruto did not allow one speck of emotion to show on his face. When Neji was finished, then Naruto spoke. You speak that it is fate that the branch family will always remain bound, yet you contradicted your own belief when you tried to kill Hinata in the prelims. You tried to divert from your predestined path. All of this, because you hold a grudge against the main family. Neji finally lost control of himself. My father was taken away from me because Hiyashi-sama couldn't take the responsibility for his actions. My father had to give his own life, just so Hiyashi-sama could keep on living. Naruto said nothing for a while. Neji thought he had got through the blonde, but was shell-shocked when he heard Naruto's next words. I already planned on winning today, but I'll say it just for you. I won't be losing to a coward who's always blaming all of his problems on some nonsense such as fate. Someone as ignorant as you is in no position to lecture me, Neji shot back. You can never understand what it's like to be burdened with a symbol you can never be rid of. There was a pin-drop silence in the whole stadium. The whole audience felt the impact of the words. Neji couldn't have been more wrong. The senior shinobi feared Naruto would lose it, even the Hokage. But thankfully, Naruto kept a tight lid on his emotions. It wouldn't do losing it in the center of a crowd. Naruto sighed wistfully, whispering, "You're wrong. I know exactly how it feels, but enough talk." He finished in a strong voice. He made a ram seal, and Neji felt that it was better to be cautious rather than just wait and see what happens. Immediately, he jumped back, or tried to anyway. It wasn't as if he was paralyzed, but it felt like his body was stuck in mud. Just as you have to struggle to move your limbs when drowned in water or mud, Neji had to struggle to just move his arms. It was as if he was stuck in clay. What the hell is this? Naruto was calmly walking forward, now that he had successfully activated his seal. Resistance seals. While normally used for training, it's somewhat unusual to apply it in combat. You are currently experiencing a level 3 resistance. Fuinjutsu is perhaps the most versatile of the shinobi arts, won't you agree? Cage box, your genin is just full of surprises, Hokage Dono. To make use of seals so efficiently in combat, with just his chakra, it's almost as if he is already an expert. Not many choose to study that particular art. Hiruzen chuckled and replied, Naruto is more than just skilled in Fuinjutsu. He is perhaps the most skilled person I have ever seen. Not surprising, if you consider just who his father was. The other, Kage, nodded in approval. He definitely qualifies for Chunin. To think he had managed to put a Hiraishin and a resistance seal on his opponent. He had been several steps ahead of his opponent right from the beginning of the match. Hiruzen absently nodded, choosing to focus on the match. Taijutsu, ninjutsu, Fuinjutsu. Stance, I didn't know Naruto knew Fuinjutsu like that. Ino exclaimed. Sakura smiled, proud of having a teammate like Naruto. Naruto is an expert in them, you know. Kiba hollered. Yosh. Go, Naruto. Tenten was dumbstruck just how many steps Naruto had been ahead of her teammate. The Jonin were beside themselves. Asuma was rubbing his head. You know, he really is quite well versed in sealing for his age. Not many people can apply seals with their chakra just like that. Kurenai nodded, and both of them tried to block out guys shouting of how youthfully Naruto was displaying his skills. Arena Neji stood rooted to his place, and to his horror, Naruto came running towards him, with him being unable to do anything about it. He received a painful punch on his right cheek, and the force behind it was enough to send him stumbling to his left. It hurt, considering he was experiencing resistance in his movements. Naruto was suddenly in front of him, punching at the same spot again. Only this time, it hurt a lot more than before. The result was the same. Neji went stumbling to his left. Finishing it off, Naruto 540 kicked the side of his head with such force that Neji could have sworn he saw stars in front of his eyes. He was sent onto the ground, and this time, there was no getting back up. You might think that it was because of the resistance seal, but no. He had taken way too many hits, and his body had finally given up. Neji could do nothing but glare at Naruto as he crouched in front of him. I told you, Naruto stated softly. Fate is a fragile concept. Our destiny is never set in stone, Neji. I am not strong because I was fated to be. I chose to work hard to reach where I am now. Hinata calls you Neji ni-san, doesn't she? You really should stop treating her like the way you do. She only wants to unite the branch family with the main family. She looks up to you as her big brother, it is only fitting you treat her like your sister. It's time you stepped up and stopped using fate as an excuse. He then removed the resistance seal from Neji. He stood up and started walking away, letting the medics carry the injured Hyuga away. He smiled as he heard a soft, maybe you're right. Perhaps there was some hope, after all. Genma declared loudly, the winner is, Uzumaki Naruto. The entire stadium burst into a tremendous applause. Everyone was clapping as hard as they could, even going so far as to stand and start chanting, Namikaze. 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 The chant resonated around in the entire stadium, and within seconds, the entire stadium was chanting it as well. Naruto, for his part, smiled softly. The sight of everyone cheering for him, even if it was a name that he really didn't use, brought a lump to his throat. He was finally acknowledged by everyone. Bowing to the crowd, he turned away and headed to the genin stands. He received many good-natured pats on the back, and shook almost everyone's hands on the way. The words, great job, and, congratulations, rang frequently in his ears. He just accepted them all with a smile and continued on his way. When he reached the stands, he took in the reactions. First there was Tamari. She was gazing at him with a small smile, and nodded at him, mouthing, good match. Despite what had occurred between them 2 nights ago, they could respect each other as competitors. He nodded back in acknowledgement. As he walked by her, her brother was next. He just scoffed and turned away, but Naruto could spot small beads of sweat. Smirking, he continued. Gaara was staring at him, arms crossed. His expression gave nothing away, but his body twitched every now and then. Naruto spotted the cork on his gourd shaking, as if the sand was struggling to come out of it. He didn't wait to see if it would actually come out. Shino gave him a nod of respect, acknowledging his strength. Good job, Naruto. Naruto nodded back, thanks. Naruto didn't need to guess the response of Shikamaru. Troublesome, the shadow user sighed, further slouching, if possible. You just had to go and cause a ruckus, didn't you? Naruto snorted. It was true, the crowd was still chanting his name. He shrugged in mock modesty, what can I say, I'm just that charismatic and awesome. Would Uchiha Sasuke and Sabaku no Gaara please come down? Cage box, a splendid display of skills, I say. Don't you agree, Kazekage Dono? Indeed, Hokage Dono. I really didn't expect this match to be this entertaining. Hiruzen smiled as he gazed at the blonde genin, soon to be Chunin. Well done Naruto. You performed better than expected. Though you could have ended the match far more quickly, you chose to amend Neji's ways by proving him wrong. You just might have gained a friend and a trusted comrade in him. He then frowned. It seems Naruto's teammate, Sasuke-kun still hasn't arrived. And I can't spot Kakashi among the Jonin as well, he thought, looking at where the Jonin senseis were standing. He shook his head, slightly in disappointment. Kakashi, your habits just cost your genin his chance at promotion. He motioned the Jonin that was standing as his guard, informed the proctor that Uchiha Sasuke is disqualified due to his lateness. Orochimaru frowned beneath the veil. He didn't want the Uchiha to be disqualified as he wanted to see how much Sasuke had improved. Hokage Dono, can we not give him 5 more minutes to arrive? I am eager to see my son test his skills against the last Uchiha. Hiruzen kept his face carefully neutral. He knew exactly why the Kazekage wanted to see the last Uchiha in action. Apologies Kazekage Dono, but I cannot allow any favoritism towards my shinobi, last Uchiha or not. Following the orders of a superior is an important part of being a chunin. By not showing up on time, Uchiha Sasuke is showing insubordination. I cannot, in good conscience, allow such a genin such as that to progress to chunin. He may try again in the next exams after 6 months. Orochimaru frowned. That won't do. Then perhaps a compromise is in order. It would be rather disappointing if he did not fight today, as many of the visiting nobility came here specifically to see the Uchiha fight. How about disqualifying him and denying him the chance of promotion, but allow him to fight in an exhibition match at the end of the tournament against the winner? That would allow the crowd to see the Uchiha fight, but still punish him for insubordination. Hiruzen thought it over a bit. If he disqualified Sasuke, Gaara would be declared the winner. According to the matchups, Gaara would then fight the winner of the first match, which was Naruto. While he was a bit worried about letting Naruto fight such a dangerous opponent, he had confidence that Naruto would be safe. Nodding, he said, "That is an acceptable arrangement, Kazekage Dono." Stan's Ino was gaping at the piece of news that was revealed to the whole of Konoha and people from beyond. To think that Naruto, the dead last of their batch and the foremost prankster of Konoha, would turn out to be the son of the man Konoha almost worshipped. I never knew, she whispered. She could not believe she missed such a big fact. She was supposed to be from a clan that were masters of the mind, yet she couldn't not see such obvious resemblance. She ought to be ashamed of herself. If not for the age, Naruto and Namikaze Minato could be clones of each other. Blonde hair of almost identical shade, azure eyes that were unique to them, it could not be more obvious than that. Sakura's jaw was almost unhinged. She couldn't believe she never saw the resemblance as well. It was so obvious. And come to think of it, she treated him like crap. The son of the hero who saved Konoha from the Kyuubi, treated like crap. Not just by her, but by the whole village, including her mother. She wanted to crawl into a hole and just hide. Kiba couldn't believe it. Well, he could, but had a hard time comprehending it. The person who he thought could never become a competent shinobi in the first place had just beat the known prodigy of the Hyuga, a person who was favored the most to win the Chunin exams. And apparently, he had done without breaking a sweat. He ruefully chuckled, I couldn't have been more wrong about him. Akamaru whined in agreement. Tenten was shaking her head in disbelief. She couldn't believe Naruto had beaten her teammate, who she believed to be the strongest genin in Konoha. But then again, he had the Yondaim's jutsu on his side. Arena Genma frowned but nodded at the message sent from the Hokage. Turning to the crowd, he announced the Kage's decision. Due to not showing up in time for his match, Uchiha Sasuke has been disqualified from the final stage of these exams. He continued despite the booing from the crowd. However, the Hokage has allowed an exhibition match between the winner of the tournament and Uchiha Sasuke in order to satisfy the visiting nobility. But he won't be given the chance to get promoted to Chunin. Therefore, winner by disqualification, Sabaku no Gaara. Stands the audience, even though they were witness to a match such as that of the Hyuga and the Uzumaki, now revealed to be the sole Namikaze, were distraught to hear that the Hokage had chosen to disqualify the last Uchiha. Many were waiting solely to watch that match, so the reason for their displeasure was quite obvious. Their spirits were lifted up a bit though, when they heard that the Uchiha would be fighting in an exhibition match with the winner of this tournament. Everyone began muttering amongst themselves excitedly. Just maybe, they might get to see a match between Uchiha Sasuke and Uzumaki Naruto. The last Uchiha versus the last Namikaze. Up in the area for the competing genin, Naruto was frowning at the latest announcement. A bit of a partial treatment, don't you think? He addressed Shikamaru. Shikamaru frowned as well. Yeah. He is getting a chance to fight, whereas any other genin wouldn't have been considered in the first place. Naruto nodded in agreement and added to the point, not only that, but he will be in peak condition to fight, while we would be worn out from fighting all the opponents. It's more than a bit unfair. Then he added mentally, though that match won't be happening anyways. The invasion would maybe begin as soon as the quarter-finals end. Thank you Kurama, for expanding my chakra reserves and making sure I am in top form today. He received a snort in response, I care not much for your words. Thank me by making sure you defeat that accursed Tanuki. He is trespassing on my area. Naruto smirked at the command. He planned to do it anyway. Down on the arena, Gaara turned and started walking back to the waiting area. His sand was twitching angrily as his next victim wasn't there. His blood had been pumping to fight the Uchiha, who he saw as a strong opponent. To find out he wasn't here. The only reason he hadn't started killing everyone with his sand was that his next match was with the Uzumaki. Uzumaki Naruto was someone worthy, someone who would prove his existence. Genma announced, the next match will be between Aburame Shino and Sabaku no Konkuro. Before he could say anything more, he was interrupted. Proctor, I forfeit. Kankuro's yell was followed by a confused look from Genma and a roar of disapproval from the crowd. Naruto narrowed his eyes at Konkuro and Temari. While Konkuro did not glance at him, Temari cast a nervous and tense look at him. Naruto just turned back to the arena. He did not expect Sasuke of all people to be late to such an event. Maybe Kakashi was counting on to make a dramatic entrance for the last loyal Uchiha. Either way, he was disqualified, which meant one thing. His next match was with Gaara. Which was a good thing. He could neutralize Gaara before the invasion even began. Of course, that was not taking account of people who could likely interfere in the fight. In order for the invasion to succeed, it was critical that Gaara unleash the full form of his tailed beast. He intended to suck Gaara dry of all his chakra and as soon as he was weakened, slap the 5 elements seal onto him. He just prayed he would be fast enough. Back in the arena, Genma was announcing. Then by default, the winner of the match is Aburame Shino. Thus, we can progress onto the next match. The next match is Nara Shikamaru vs Sabaku no Temari. Naruto glanced towards his right. He smiled when a determined look came over Temari. She pulled out her fan from her sash and swiped. Naruto whistled, impressed that such a large amount of wind was generated from just one swipe. He watched as Temari jumped onto her fan and gracefully glided towards where Genma was standing. She set her fan down with one hand, the other hand resting on her hip and smirking, fully confident of her victory. Damn, that confidence makes her look so much sexier, Naruto thought with a slight nosebleed as he imagined some very naughty thoughts, ignoring the sniggering bastard within him. He wiped the blood off with his sleeve and glanced towards his left. Shikamaru had a panicked look on his face. Oi, why is it always my match that gets jumped up? He began to back away from the railing. I'm forfeiting as well. I don't care what my troublesome Ka-san says or does to me, I am not. His rant was cut off when a hand was placed on his shoulder. He turned to face Naruto with a quizzical look. What are you? It's okay Shika, Naruto said, complete with the sympathetic look. Shikamaru gave him a suspicious look, so Naruto did his best not to smile. But there's just one problem. If possible, Shikamaru narrowed his eyes even further. What? You can't forfeit. The next moment, he was standing right in front of a smirking Proctor and Temari. He blinked once, trying to figure what the hell just happened and how did he get down here. He turned around, and saw the complete look of innocence on Naruto's face. He gave a look of bloody murder at the blonde he called his friend. He had the nerve to use the flying thunder god to send him to the arena. He turned around, grumbling that at least he didn't have to walk the distance from the waiting area to the center arena. Naruto smirked when Shikamaru gave a burning glare at him. He wouldn't have been able to send Shikamaru the arena if a marker wasn't already present. As it happened to be, there indeed was a marker, on Temari's skin, right below her left butt cheek. He put it on her while they were kissing in the alley, and he was holding her up by her butt. Her dress had rose up a bit, exposing more skin than what was appropriate for people of their age. A drop of blood trickled from his nose, happy times. He was brought back from a trip down the gutter by the proctor's call of beginning the match. He smirked when he saw Temari outright assaulting him, but had enough sense not to pursue him in the trees. He smirked as he saw the match progress, with Shikamaru passing time so as to lengthen the limit of his shadow. While Temari was certainly clever enough to engage from long distance, she failed to see that Shikamaru was obviously leading her into a specific position. Sorry Temari, but you weren't in the winning position in the first place. You aren't ready to beat an opponent of Shikamaru's caliber, yet. Naruto's guess about what Shikamaru was trying to do was proved right. While in the beginning of the match, it may have seemed that Shikamaru was randomly throwing kunai at her and missing. But Naruto knew that Shika didn't do anything without a purpose. When people are shown various, random pieces, they are confused and fail to see the bigger picture they make. The match dragged on for almost an hour, but at the end of the hour, Tamari was caught in the grasp of Shikamaru's shadow. While it had seemed the kunai were just thrown around randomly, each of them had acted as a sort of platform for the shadow to jump from. Tamari was too late to spot it, and finally got caught. On the arena, Tamari was frozen. She couldn't believe that she was caught like this. Damn it. I was too late to see it. I should have finished him early with a large-scale jutsu. Instead I got caught playing his game. All the high-ranking shinobi were amazed and impressed. The level of planning, the number of steps he had thought ahead, this was another shining example of Chunin material. The exams this year were showcasing some real talent. Shikamaru played to his strengths, using his extreme talent for strategies to set a trap for his opponent. A trap that was clever enough not to be noticed by his opponent until it was too late. While he had not dispatched his opponent like Naruto, the skill shown was enough to tell that the lazy Nara was worthy of promotion. Naruto had owned his fight from the start. Even though everyone was smart enough not to engage a Hyuga in taijutsu, Naruto knew he was better than Neji. Even when he was confronted with Neji's defensive technique, he proved his smarts as he found a way around it. Overall, both the matches had shown that the genin from Konoha this year were worthy of being promoted. Arena Tamari felt the unnerving feeling of not being in control of her own body as it stiffly shuffled forward. It was very awkward to walk with movements not your own. As the gap closed down between them to a mere 5 feet, they locked gazes. Shikamaru's gaze was level, his eyes giving nothing away. Tamari's gaze was full of defiance and fierce anger. She was glaring at him with her jade eyes so hard that Shikamaru briefly wondered if he would catch on fire. H raised his hand in the air, his shadow bind on Tamari ensuring that she did the same. She quivered, trying as hard as she could to fight it. She refused to admit defeat to this lazy excuse of a shinobi. I give up. I don't have any chakra left. His lazy voice carried over clearly, and whatever the audience was going to say died in their throat. What was the general reaction all around? Asuma was shaking his head. That kid has never been motivated for anything ever since I met him. The audience slowly started clapping throughout the stadium. People could appreciate a good battle of minds, even if it wasn't as flashy or as big as they wanted it to be. Arena Genma just snorted and announced, winner, Sabaku no Tamari. Shikamaru released his hold on Tamari, who only just managed to catch herself. She stared at the retreating back of the genin, and managed to stutter out. "Why?" Shikamaru turned around and answered, shrugging in a way that really made him look like a guy who doesn't want to be bothered for anything. It makes no sense to succumb to chakra exhaustion just for this when I might need my energy later. He turned to go to the audience stands. As he had lost, he won't be fighting any future matches, so there was no reason for him to go back to the waiting area. As he approached the place where he had spotted Choji before his fight, he was slightly surprised to see almost all the rookies and Jonin senseis present, talking to Naruto. The blonde was chuckling at one of Lee's no doubt, highly youthful statements. Everyone was trying to talk to him, and Naruto was answering all their questions with a patient smile. The guy had become an instant celebrity. He spotted Shikamaru walking up and turned away from the group, choosing to grin in the shadow user's face. Shikamaru gave him a look that froze his two teammates in place, while Sakura just gave a confused look to Naruto. Asuma and Kurenai were smirking, while Lee and Guy looked as if they would burst with their youthfulness any moment. Naruto waved a hand in his direction, grin not falling from his face for even a moment. Go on, you look like you want to say something. Shikamaru didn't bother wasting more energy to reply and merely sighed exhaustedly, dropping his glare. He dropped down between Ino and Choji. Ino's attention immediately switched from Naruto to him, causing him to mutter something about tiresome blondes. Choji, the sweet guy that he was, merely offered a potato chip with a smile. Shikamaru smiled back at his longtime friend and took a few, the crunching sound they made almost soothing to him. Arena Genma looked over to the Hokage, giving a questioning look. The Hokage shook his head and waved him to continue with the matches. Genma nodded and turned to the audience. The quarter-final matches are over. We will now proceed to the semi-finals. First semi-final match will be Sabaku no Gaara vs Uzumaki Naruto. Audience. The crowd roared in approval of the match, as they wanted to see, once again, the only son of the Yondaime in action. They were not going to see the Uchiha in action until the very end of the final match, but they weren't complaining about seeing Naruto in action in Sasuke's place. Over to where the rookies and their senseis were standing, the atmosphere was completely different in comparison to the rest of the crowd. It was as if someone had flipped a switch. 1 second, everyone was talking and joking around, the other second, everyone had grim faces. Only Naruto had a completely serious face that was not filled with any fear. No one had forgotten what Gaara had done to Lee back in the prelims. Would the contestants please come down? Gaara appeared in a whirl of sand next to Genma. Naruto took a deep breath and straightened up. He was about to walk down to the arena when he felt a hand rest on his shoulder. Turning around, he saw that it was Asuma's. Naruto, wow, he was serious, be careful down there. Kurenai and Guy also nodded seriously around him. Try to finish it as quickly as you can. Naruto smirked. I could finish it in a flash, but I've got a different strategy in mind. With that, he walked off, the rest of the rookies mumbling their good luck wishes. He snorted when Shikamaru mumbled you better not die. Ino swatted his head for that. Arena. Naruto kept his eye on Gaara the entire time he walked to the center of the arena. Gaara had dropped all pretense of being calm and controlled. A grin not unlike that of a psychopathic killer graced his face as Naruto came to stand in front of him. The tension was so thick that it was almost suffocating. Gaara was releasing ungodly amounts of killer amount, his quirk already twitching madly, as if the sand had a mind of its own instead of being in Gaara's control. Naruto, instead of releasing killing intent of his own, slowly started saturating the air with a moderate amount of chakra. His chakra was very dense, in addition to being almost soothing and had a positive feeling to it, unlike Gaara's. It somewhat eased the tension in the air. Genma nervously watched both of them. Cage box. Orochimaru smirked behind his veil. While he wished to see how Sasuke would do against Gaara, this was a fine arrangement as well. A match between two Jinchuriki would no doubt prove very informative. This should be a very entertaining match. Kage Dono. Your son versus the Yondaime Hokage's son, Hiruzen commented with a chuckle, hiding his nervousness about Naruto's safety. But you must understand my concern, given what happened to one of my genin in the prelims. The other Kage waved a hand. Worry not, Hokage Dono. Your genin has proved himself to be most ingenious and resourceful. However, if worst does come to pass, I'll stop Gaara myself. Hiruzen had to commend Orochimaru on his acting skills. Had he not known it was his former student under those robes, he would have believed that statement wholeheartedly. He turned his attention back to the match. Naruto was up against a Jinchuriki who had full control of his Biju. He was fully confident in Naruto's skills, but he couldn't wave the worry away. Something on the arena caught both the Kage's attention. Arena. Just as Genma was about to give the signal to begin, a sudden whirl of wind and leaves interrupted them. And received a frown from Naruto and Gaara. As the whirlwind settled down, Naruto had to stop himself from looking thoroughly annoyed. Two figures were standing back to back. Naruto mentally sighed, he really did want to make a dramatic entrance, after all. Kakashi and Sasuke were standing right in between Gaara and Naruto. Kakashi looked the same as always, while Sasuke had dramatically changed his attire, opting for a darker theme. He wore a black, one-piece version of his usual attire, with bandages wrapped around his left arm. Sasuke smirked as he came face to face with Gaara. He had trained heavily for the last month, even mastering a lethal jutsu. A jutsu that would secure him his victory. Sorry I'm a bit late for our match. But we can begin now. Gaara had made it very clear back in the prelims that he was very excited to face Sasuke in the finals and couldn't wait for the match. So it came as a shock to Sasuke when Gaara coldly replied, "Move aside, you are in my way." No reply came to his mouth, only snapping out of the shock when he heard Kakashi's voice. Is that you, Naruto?" Kakashi blinked as he came face to face with a face that looked painfully similar to his late sensei. The dots took a moment to connect and once they did, his eye went wide. Is that you, Naruto?" Naruto was already annoyed for the interruption, so his patience was thinner than usual. He snapped back, "Yes, it's me. Now would you mind taking Sasuke to the stands with you? You are interfering with my match." Kakashi blinked and turned to Genma, "We are not late, are we?" Genma gave him his best deadpan look. You are a bit too late, actually. Uchiha Sasuke has been disqualified due to being late for his fight and won't be fighting in any of the matches for a chance at promotion. He will only fight in an exhibition match at the very end of the tournament. Anger filled Sasuke's features and he snarled in a whisper, you can't do that. Genma was unimpressed with the glare. Tell that to the Hokage. It was his decision in the first place. Now get out of my arena, he motioned to them. Sasuke turned his snarl onto Naruto. Move, Naruto. This is my fight. Naruto fired back in a calm manner. Your match was in the quarter-finals, Sasuke. This is the semi-finals. Get off the field. Sasuke almost made to punch Naruto when Kakashi grabbed his shoulder tightly. Calm down, Sasuke. Turning to Naruto, he gave an eye smile. The whole month he had felt tremendously guilty for not training Naruto. Seeing this as the semi-finals, it was easy to conclude that Naruto had won his first match against Neji. Congratulations on winning your first fight, Naruto. All the best for this one. With that, he shunshined to the stands with all the rookies and Jonin senseis. Genma turned to Naruto and Gaara. Are you two ready? Naruto nodded, while Gaara made his impatience known. Just start it already. Mother is hungry for his blood. Genma nodded and chopped the air in front of him. Hajime. Naruto immediately jumped back. Gaara whispered with a crazy expression, make me feel alive, Uzumaki. The cork on his gourd flew off with the pressure his sand was putting on it. An enormous amount of sand, almost half of it, Naruto estimated, flew out and rushed towards him. Naruto immediately flash-stepped to 20 meters behind Gaara to avoid it. It's not enough. I'll have to goad him until he unleashes every grain of his goddamn sand. He pulled out 4 of his Hiraishin kunai, and flash-stepped back to his previous position to avoid the stab of sand. The only thing he left behind was the kunai, lodged in the ground. He repeated the process until the 4 kunai were scattered in a trapezius position around Gaara. You won't get me like that. Come on, show me what you got. He then flashed to a kunai to escape Gaara's sand. It was a waiting game for him now. Cage box, he is not so forward in this fight as he was in his previous one, Hokage Dono. Hiruzen nodded his head, he might be scouting for Gaara's weakness to form a viable plan. We'll just have to wait and see. Orochimaru chuckled, Gaara's defense is absolute, Hokage Dono. He would run out of chakra faster than he would find a weakness. Hiruzen smirked, we both know what happened to the so-called ultimate defense of the Hyuga, Kazekage Dono. He refrained from chuckling at the silence that followed. The whole audience was leaning forward in their seats, eager to see the famous Hiraishin no Jutsu in action. The rookies were all wondering what the blonde was up to. Ino asked, confused, why is he scattering those kunai? It's not like he's using them to attack Gaara or something. Shikamaru was frowning as well, trying to discern Naruto's strategy. Just what was he up to? If anyone looked at Sasuke, they would think that he was about to burst a blood vessel on his forehead. His jaw was clenched and eyes filled with jealousy and scorn as he looked at Naruto easily dodging Gaara's attempts, Sharingan fully activated. What is that jutsu? Is that the reason he is so fast? My eyes can't even begin to trace his movements. He looks as if he isn't even beginning to get tired. I should be the one who knows that jutsu, so I can use it to kill him. What does he need it for? Just how far ahead of me are you, Naruto? Sasuke was pissed as whatever jutsu Naruto was using to doge Gaara's sand, he wasn't using any hand signs, so Sasuke had no chance of copying it. Kakashi had pulled his headband up as soon as the match had begun. While he should be saving it for the invasion, he wanted to see Naruto use his sensei's legacy in action. He watched as Naruto put the kunai around Gaara, doing nothing but teleporting from one to another. His eyes narrowed as pieces of a similar tactic came to his mind, but could not piece it together. By his side, Asuma spoke up in a grave tone, Gaara will get mad if Naruto keeps doing this. Getting that kid mad is the last thing he needs to do. Kakashi absently spoke up, eyes keenly observing the match. On second thought, that might be exactly what he might be trying to do. The 3 other Jonin whipped to stare at him with wide, disbelieving eyes. The genin, who had heard the conversation as well, turned to stare at him with wide eyes as well. But unlike the Jonin, there was a bit of fear and horror in their eyes. Is he mad or what? Ino almost shrieked. But Kakashi was not worried at all. From what he had seen of Naruto up until now, Naruto resembled his father more than his mother. And if Naruto was even half like his father was, he had no reason to worry. Arena he could see it. Gaara was beginning to show signs of irritation at his repeated escape attempts. He had started to flash step around as well, not wanting to give Gaara a pattern to follow his kunai. If he thought Naruto was only using the kunai to escape his grasp, he just might uproot and throw them away. Gaara was gritting his teeth as Uzumaki yet again escaped his grasp. More sand flew from his gourd as he tried cover a larger area with it, cutting Naruto's chances of escape. Why are you escaping, Uzumaki? Face me. Now's my chance. Flash stepping to a more cleared part of the arena, he called out. Gaara. Gaara narrowed his eyes, his sand momentarily pausing in its pursuit of Naruto. What is it, Uzumaki? Are you afraid to face me? Is that why you are running away? To his surprise, Naruto snorted out loud. You think those pathetic attacks can get to me? Your sand has yet to even come close to touching me. Come on, Gaara, unleash every drop of your sand. His words had the intended effect on Gaara. More sand flew out of his gourd, and he uncrossed his arms. His face split into a truly frightening grin. Naruto internally smirked. Just one more push should do it. Naruto spread his arms out. In your own words, make me feel alive. The last part was whispered with a challenging grin. That finally did it for Gaara. An opponent who was asking the same thing he asked from him. This was almost like a rare treat for him. No one asked him to make them feel alive, as he was usually the one to do it. With deadly intent, he whispered, "Fine, Uzumaki." He commanded all of his sand to come out of the gourd, which was truly a huge amount. It could cover almost one entire half of the arena in ankle-deep sand. He shouted as he spread his own hands, almost laughing. Let's make each other feel alive. Cage Box Hiruzen was intently observing the match, trying to make out Naruto's plan. Naruto was mad if he wanted to fight Gaara at full power, but there was a glint in Naruto's eyes that told him that this was part of a plan. Orochimaru was barely refraining from laughing in joy. He couldn't have asked for a more entertaining match. He doubted that even Sasuke could have given such entertainment to him. He secretly signaled for his people to be ready. The time for the invasion to start was drawing to a close. Every rookie and Jonin-sensei watched in horror as Naruto asked Gaara to come at him with full power. He had basically just signed his death warrant, many thought. Sakura almost shrieked. What is that idiot doing? Guy nodded grimly. I have to agree with your student, Kakashi. Fighting that genin at full power seems to be an extremely bad idea. Kakashi gave no reply as worry began creeping in him. He could only hope Naruto had a plan to deal with that amount of sand. Sasuke intently watched with his Sharingan active, ready to spot any hand signs that Naruto might weave. He would take any opportunity to copy Naruto's jutsu. Not once did concern rang for his teammate potentially facing his death. Arena the crowd gasped at seeing the huge amount of sand rotating behind Gaara in form of a vortex. Gaara was grinning in a way that would have sent many shinobi running in the opposite direction, but not Naruto. Naruto was prepared for this. Take this, Uzumaki. The vortex rushed towards with the force of a sandstorm. Naruto narrowed his eyes and gathered his chakra. He jumped almost impossibly high, clean above the rushing vortex, two Hiraishin kunai in hand. He threw one of them 20 meters behind Gaara, completing the pattern he was going for. Gaara was so deep into his bloodlust that he failed to take notice of the kunai arranged around him in a pentagon. The other one went 20 meters ahead of the kunai he just threw. As he predicted, the vortex changed direction and headed right for him, when he was still in the jump. He thought he might have heard someone shouting his name, but he could have imagined it. Just as the vortex was about to hit him, he flashed to the last kunai he threw, momentarily entering safe zone. Sakura could no longer hold her concern for her teammate. Everyone watched in horror as the vortex almost swallowed, at which point Sakura shouted. Naruto. She practically melted in relief when Naruto disappeared, reappearing at the kunai he just threw. Looking back, she saw that everyone unconsciously relaxed from the tension. Kakashi didn't know that he was holding his breath until he released it. He had not seen such dangerous maneuvers in a long time. He was used to seeing his sensei do it like that, but Naruto on the other hand. It was strangely nostalgic, almost like seeing his sensei in action. Arena. Naruto appeared at the Kanai Inn. A crouch, expression serious and eyes set on the sand vortex. Gaara turned around and wasted no time in sending the vortex towards Naruto very gleefully, but this time, he split it in four, so that it would converge on Naruto from four different directions. Naruto only needed 2 hand seals to make this work. He had already saturated the air with his chakra before, so his chances of success were high. Tiger Bird, Sweden. Mizu Tatsumaki no Jutsu. Water Style. Water Tornado Technique. Naruto converted the entire amount of chakra he had saturated the air with into water chakra. A giant spinning vortex made of water of his own seemed to suddenly come into existence around him. The 4 smaller vortexes of sand crashed into the vortex from 4 different sides. Naruto was rotating his water vortex at such a high speed that the sand that crashed into it was dispersed almost instantly upon contact, becoming wet and heavy. Cage Box. It is very surprising to see that he has a water affinity as well. One strong enough to draw water from thin air. Wasn't the Nadaime known for the same feat? Orochimaru asked in genuine surprise. Not every day he met ninja, let alone a genin, who could perform feat like some of the Kage. Hiruzen nodded, a relieved smile appearing on his face. He did have a plan after all, he mused. Stands. The crowd was cheering Naruto on. They thought that Naruto would escape using the Hiraishin, or worse, get crushed. But then, a tornado of water came into existence around him from seemingly nowhere. It protected Naruto from the sand perfectly. The Jonin were once again wide-eyed, including Kakashi. Kurenai shook her head. He drew water from the air around him. Most water users can't do even half of what he just did. Guy and Lee were shouting. Such youthfulness. Kakashi pointed out to his peers and the genin, whose eyes were wide with wonder at the display of power. Not just that, but that jutsu acted both as a defense and an offense in Naruto's favor. Sand becomes heavy when hit with water. So by hitting Gaara's sand with water, Naruto negated the sheer control Gaara had on his sand, ensuring his safety simultaneously. No doubt, Gaara would find wet sand increasingly difficult to control. As Kakashi explained Naruto's move, Sasuke found himself getting increasingly frustrated. Why was Naruto so powerful in comparison to him? Was he hiding this much all along? He had to painfully admit, Naruto had dealt with Gaara much more efficiently than he would have. He had nothing but taijutsu, speed, and the jutsu Kakashi had taught him to deal with Gaara, which really wasn't much compared to what Naruto had. His fire was useless unless it was hot enough to turn sand into glass, which it wasn't. He couldn't even copy Naruto's jutsu, for fuck's sake. In addition to the absence of a water affinity, he needed to see all the hand signs to copy a jutsu. Naruto obviously had a very high water affinity to use a jutsu like that too in the absence of water and with only 2 hand seals. He knew Naruto had a large amount of chakra, but this was just ridiculous. He was still not looking winded. He clenched his fists so tight that blood seeped out. The cursed seal throbbed on his shoulder, but he forcefully pushed its influence back. I will make your power my own, Naruto. Just you wait. Arena. Naruto maintained the vortex for about 5 seconds, after which the sand stopped coming. Dispersing the vortex outwards with a flourish, he smirked at the results. All the sand that he had been attacked by was now wet, saturated with water and heavy. It won't be as fast as before. Gaara watched in alarm as his sand collided into a water vortex that seemingly came out of nowhere. He realized too late, even with Mother shouting in his head, what Naruto had planned, but it was too late. Almost all the sand was wet now, and only a tiny amount was available to him, the only amount he was able to pull back before it was too late. He rotated it in the form of a ring around him to prevent it from getting any more wet. Naruto didn't waste time admiring the effects of his jutsu. Forming the bird seal, he took a deep breath and let go. Sweden. Mizurappa. Water Style. Violent water wave, a jet of water was expelled from his mouth, heading towards Gaara with great force. Gaara looked stunned as the sand automatically formed as a barrier in front of him, taking the brunt of the water. Gaara hadn't felt this helpless in a long time. Uzumaki had a counter for his sand, which was a major part of how he fought. He could make his own sand, but that took him some time, which he didn't have. He would have to do it nonetheless. He molded a huge amount of his own chakra, sand particles slowly forming in front of him. He couldn't help but let his excitement grow a little. It was hard to remember just when he had let loose like this the last time. Naruto smirked as the last of the sand fell in front of Gaara, wet and unusable. He had taken into account that a sand user such as Gaara would be able to form his own sand even if he negated it, which was exactly what Gaara was trying to do now. Oh no, you don't. Boar Snake Dragon Ram. The kunai finally would come into play. Gaara's choice of standing in one place would cost him dearly. Cage Box. Very clever of him to have negated Gaara's sand, Hokage Dono. I can't help but feel that Naruto-kun is well above the level of a Chunin, don't you think? Hiruzen smiled in pride as Naruto used the element of water to completely turn the tables on Gaara. He couldn't help but be reminded of Tobirama-sensei. He was pretty much the same. His mastery of water was so unrivaled that he used to turn the battle in his favor in a place where there was no water. Considering that Naruto now had a Jinchuriki on the ropes without resorting to his own Biju chakra, he was starting to feel the same. Naruto was well above the level of a Chunin. He doubted any Jonin could have turned the tides like Naruto did. Stance, holy shit. Did you see that? Ino shrieked, pointing at Naruto as if she couldn't believe it. Shikamaru slowly nodded, still trying to make sense of how Naruto did what he just did. He took away Gaara's greatest advantage. Sakura was smiling with happiness. At first she had doubted Naruto could beat Gaara, but Naruto had shown that he could find a way around the impossible. Arena Gaara was still concentrating on forming his sand when a light green shield rose up around him. He whipped his head from side to side, trying to figure out how it came into existence without him noticing. Then he felt it. He knew he was draining his chakra forming his sand, but the chakra drain was much larger than he usually felt. He then noticed the light green barrier was slowly turning into a darker shade. He looked down to his feet, noticing that he was standing in the center of a complex ceiling array shaped like a pentagon. His eyes widened in realization. This was a chakra-absorbing barrier. Naruto was smirking as he held up the ram seal. Uzumaki Fuinjutsu. Kisei Shoheiki Uzumaki Sealing Arts. Parasitic barrier was a success. This pentagonal barrier was designed by the Uzumaki clan to suck the chakra right out of their enemies. The best thing about this barrier was that the users only need to spend an initial amount of chakra to simply build the barrier, not maintain. The barrier maintained itself and grew stronger by sucking the chakra of the people trapped inside. This barrier was designed to be used by 5 people. But Naruto's dad had written in his notes that he was able to use this barrier all by himself with the help of his special kunai. The formula on the kunai acted as a sort of dimensional rift. Instead of sending himself through that rift, Minato sent his chakra to all the 5 points, thus successfully setting up the barrier. For Naruto, this was no problem at all. His chakra control was excellent and on a level that he could split his chakra and send it in different direction, through a dimensional slipstream, without any problem. And, he had more than enough chakra to spare. Gaara tried to use whatever sand he had built up, which was only a small amount, to break the barrier. Naruto called out, "It's fruitless, Gaara. This barrier will take more than just physical attacks to break." Cage Box. Incredible, simply incredible, Orochimaru breathed out in amazement. To be able to use Fuinjutsu like this, in conjunction to the Hiraishin, it was a testament to Naruto's genius and the incredible amount of power and skill that he had. Hiruzen was in the same state of awe, though he was able to keep it to himself. Minato was the only one who was capable of using barriers like this. For Naruto to replicate this feat, it spoke volumes of his mastery of the art. "You have a true gem in your forces, Hokage Dono," Orochimaru complimented. Though he was silently lamenting why he could not mark Naruto. Putting his curse seal on a Jinchuriki was something that even he didn't want to test. Hiruzen smiled in pride. "That I do, Kage Dono." The audience was in awe of the power and skill displayed by the last Namikaze. As soon as he had trapped Gaara inside, they had erupted into cheers that could be heard throughout the entire village. Asuma stuttered out, What power? He had only ever seen barriers of this magnitude used by a single person, and that was the Yondaime. Kurenai simply gaped at the skill being displayed. Guy was shouting something about youthfulness again, so only Lee was listening to him. Everyone had tuned out both of them. Kakashi gazed in utter pride as he watched Naruto corner Gaara and trap him inside his barrier. "Sensei, You would be proud of who Naruto has become, he whispered. He looked over to see the genin reactions. Sakura and Ino were cheering loudly, while Shikamaru and Choji were leaning forward with smiles, Choji's more vibrant than that of Shikamaru's, interested in seeing what Naruto would do next. He smiled at seeing their reactions. Naruto, you managed to make your comrades believe in you. Earlier, they may not have found you to be trustworthy, however today, you managed to convince them that they can trust you with their lives, Kakashi thought, pride inside him growing by the second. He glanced to the side, and found himself disappointed. He wondered, not for the first time since arriving to the stadium, whether or not he had made the right choice in choosing to ditch Naruto and train Sasuke for the finals. He was beginning to think he may have been wrong after all. Sasuke had clenched his jaw, his fists and was watching Naruto dispatch Gaara with efficiency he knew he didn't have. Naruto's way had been very professional. First, find the weakness. Second, exploit the weakness and take away the strengths. Finally, finish him off. He didn't even have words to express just how furious he was, both with Naruto and himself. He was furious with Naruto for being so much stronger than him. He was furious with himself for being so weak compared to Naruto. He wanted to be the strongest. Only when he was strongest would he be able to kill him. His Sharingan flashed, he wanted to copy all the techniques Naruto had to offer and leave him with nothing. Only he deserved to be the strongest, not him. Kakashi shook his head. Perhaps training Sasuke was a bad choice after all. Not surprising, considering the number of those type of choices he had made in his life. Sasuke looked like he would sooner kill Naruto and take his techniques for himself than call Naruto a friend and a comrade. Arena Naruto watched Gaara drop to all fours, no doubt the result of the barrier absorbing his chakra, which was now a dark shade of green. He dropped the barrier as soon as Gaara looked he would pass out. He ran forward, making sure not to use a flash step. Gaara was breathing heavily, trying not drop in exhaustion. This was the first time he had suffered something like this, and all because of that damn Uzumaki. Rage began to boil inside. His mother began screaming in his head. Kill him, Gaara. Kill him. Give me his blood. I want his blood. Yes, mother, Gaara agreed before looking up to glare at Uzumaki. He was about to take mother's power when he was suddenly sent flying, landing in a heap. Naruto had punched him on the nose with enough force to break it, and watched with some satisfaction as Gaara was sent flying. He landed about 10 meters from Naruto, and Naruto feared that he had knocked the redhead out. But then Gaara stirred, causing Naruto to relax a bit. Gaara stood up on shaky legs, which Naruto took as a positive sign to initiate the last part of his plan. His fingertips on the right hand lit up in 5 purple, kanji characters. Cage box. Orochimaru's eyes widened in panic. He knows that as well. I can't let him put that seal on Gaara. He immediately gave his signal to start the invasion. Arena Naruto was about run and slam the seal onto Gaara, making sure Shukaku didn't come out to play. Gaara felt something wet on his face. He wiped his hand and took a look at what it was. A scream so chilling erupted from his throat, and Naruto took that as his chance. If he was late, he would never be able to put it on Gaara again. Blood. My blood. Gaara screamed in pain. He had never seen his own blood before. He wasn't if he even had it. But he knew now, and it hurt so badly to see his blood. His mind snapped, and he only wanted to kill everyone and everything that hurt him, including Uzumaki Naruto. A roar that was not entirely his own came from him. Naruto was 5 feet from Gaara, fingers outstretched and ready to slap it on him, when sand erupted from Gaara, coming from God knows where, in the shape of a hand covered in purple lines, shooting towards him. Naruto flashed towards the farthest kunai, escaping from being grabbed by a hair's breadth. Shit. His danger sense rang, and he turned his head to the cage box, where an explosion took place and suddenly, feathers were falling from above. The invasion had begun, and he was too late to stop it. Chapter 18. Naruto watched with narrowed eyes as chaos seemed to make its presence known across the whole stadium in just a moment. No doubt about it. The invasion has begun. And most probably, this is not the only place that is being attacked. Oto and Suna Shinobi would most likely be attacking the most vulnerable areas as well, like the academy. His eyes narrowed at the last thought in silent anger. It was a perfect strategy to kickstart Konoha's destruction. If they attack the foundation of shinobi in the village, the field where the future generation of shinobi were born and bred, Konoha would be absolutely crippled. The amount of time it would take to recover from such an attack would be so long that it wasn't even funny. I really hope Ero Sennin is still in village. For now though, I have other things to concentrate on. He sensed foreign chakra in his system, a genjutsu settling on him, trying to put him to sleep. A quick pulse of his chakra shattered the genjutsu, and just in time too. His danger sense rang in alarm, alerting him of a threat behind his back. He didn't need to turn around to find out what it was, he already knew. Just as the arm of sand reached him, red lightning wildly danced around his body. Naruto ducked right under it, and spun on his heel, thrusting his right palm right into Gaara's chest. Only then he got a good look at what Gaara had transformed into. His right arm had transformed into a giant claw of sand, which had purple lines, looking suspiciously like seal markings. His gourd seemed to have melted into sand, having spread over his right arm and his back. A huge tail had formed on his back, which Naruto deduced had enough swing force behind it to smack someone right into unconsciousness. Naruto then saw where he had struck and smirked. Gaara's chest was uncovered by the sand, exposed for all to strike. He amped up the lightning, causing lightning to streak across Gaara's body. Gaara roared in pain, his muscles spasming and contracting against his will. On instinct, his tail swung around with devastating force to strike Naruto away. Naruto neatly backflipped away, and was up in his stance immediately, his Hiraishin Kuni held in both hands, reverse grip. The shock of Naruto's lightning was enough to throw Gaara back several feet, light burns appearing on the places that weren't shielded by his sand. Gaara sat up groaning, putting both of his hands on either side of his head. Naruto knew well enough what was going on, and this was his chance to stop it. Just as he was about to rush at Gaara, 4 figures dropped between the two of them, causing Naruto to narrow his eyes. The eyes narrowed further when 2 more figures jumped right in front of him. Sasuke saw the genjutsu and easily dispelled it, wondering what the hell was going on. He then set his eyes on the arena, seeing Naruto face off against all the 3 siblings. Sasuke frowned, looking around. The entire population of the audience seemed to have fallen asleep, most likely the result of a genjutsu. Looking back at the field, he made a split-second decision and jumped off, landing right in front of Naruto and dropping into his stance. I may not know what is going on, but I'll be damned if I let you fight all of them alone. You already have stolen one of my fights, I won't let you do it again. Genma was not entirely surprised when the invasion began. The senior shinobi had been briefed upon the invasion by the Sandame, so they already had their orders on what to do. Genma looked at Naruto, who was in a fighting stance against the Sand siblings and a Jonin, most likely their sensei. He chewed on the senbon he always kept in his mouth. Considering what I've seen up until now, Naruto could easily hold his own against those. But it's better not to take chances. He jumped in front of Naruto as well, noting with slight surprise that the Uchiha arrived as well. Good, I wouldn't mind some extra backup, especially an Uchiha. He took his stance as well, facing the 4 Sand Shinobi. Baki sweated a bit as he looked at his opponents. A Jonin of Konoha, one who he could likely take on and win, but he wasn't sure if his students could win against the other 2. He wasn't that much worried about the Uchiha. While he had won his fight in the prelims, he had shown nothing special over there. If Temari and Kankuro were to team up, they could likely defeat him. But it was the blonde that he was most worried about. The cold, azure eyes that reminded him of a legendary shinobi of the past. Those eyes contained no mercy, only cold deadliness that could kill you in the blink of an eye. Uzumaki Naruto had just become a major obstacle in their plans. With the Hiraishin no Jutsu, Namikaze Minato had finished off 1,000 of Iwa's shinobi in mere seconds, single-handedly securing Konoha's victory at the Third Great Shinobi War. Baki had no doubt that his son could do the same. He had almost defeated Gaara, and would likely have if the signal for the invasion hadn't been given and he hadn't interfered. They would have to tread carefully. Looking back at Gaara, he noted the various burns on him that were healing slowly, but surely. A bad sign, considering that the redhead was clutching his head, no doubt fighting an inner debate. Temari, Kankuro, he spoke in a low voice. Once he had their attention, he said, Gaara's a vital part of the invasion. But right now, he can't fight. Take him to a secure place until he heals and recovers his chakra. Once he is fully recovered, resume your mission. Kankuro nodded and picked Gaara up, understood. Temari nervously glanced at the opposing side, specifically at Naruto. For the last 2 days, she had spent most of her time thinking on what she would do if she and Naruto faced each other in the invasion. After much thought and deliberation, she had come to the conclusion that she won't be able to bring herself to kill Naruto. Her feelings for the blonde were only growing. She pushed back her tears on seeing him now. His eyes were colder than what they had been 2 days ago. She could see no hesitation in them, only iron-hard resolve. Kankuro nudged her. Let's go, Temari. Stealing her own resolve, she nodded and they both jumped over the stadium walls, heading into the forests of Konoha. Genma made a sound of irritation, and slightly turned his head to address the two genin. He didn't know why this decision made sense, but he had no choice. Kakashi had already issued his orders to him. The nerve of that Cyclops. Uchiha Sasuke, he spoke in a serious tone, drawing the attention of the said Uchiha. You have been said to be above your peers, so I'm going to assume that you are Chunin level already. He was interrupted by a smirking Sasuke. You want me to pursue them and defeat Gaara, right? Genma nodded. He hated sending Genin, who he didn't even know the level of, after a murderous, homicidal psychopath who was also a Jinchuriki. But orders were orders, after all. Try to hold out as long as you can. I'll send backup as soon as I can. Sasuke snorted. Backup won't be necessary. I'll defeat them. He shot Naruto a challenging look before jumping after the 3 siblings over the wall. Naruto watched as his teammate disappeared over the wall. Arrogant, impulsive idiot. Not dropping his guard, he addressed the proctor. Genma-san, was it a good idea to send him alone to fight an unstable Jinchuriki? Particularly when he has no backup. Genma replied, sorry kid, but I had no other choice at the moment. Kakashi already gave me orders to send you to him once the invasion begins. Report to him for your assignment immediately. Naruto did not like the situation at all, but could do little about it. Nodding, he immediately located Kakashi's marker and flashed away, leaving Genma and Baki to face off. Genma began in his usual lazy drawl, you guys have a lot of nerve, attacking us like you did. Baki scoffed as he pulled out a kunai. Less talk, more fighting, tree hugger. XXXXXXX Kakashi was keeping a close eye on his surroundings, and couldn't help but worry when Sasuke leapt off in pursuit of the siblings. Naruto would have been a way better choice, but he had not counted Sasuke's disqualification as a part of his plans. He could only hope Sasuke remained alive until backup arrived. Backup. Now that's an idea. He was posted for protection duty. He was to ensure that the civilians were safely transported to safety under the protection of the Anbu. He looked over to the arena, and saw Naruto nodding at something that Genma said and vanishing a moment later. That was perhaps the only reason he did not jump in surprise when Naruto suddenly appeared beside him. Naruto, you are working with me today, if only temporarily. The forces would soon be swarming in the stadium any moment. The Anbu are clearing the stadium of the civilians. We will be tackling the forces inside the stadium. Naruto nodded seriously. Was it really a good idea to send Sasuke after those 3 instead of me, sensei? Kakashi resisted the urge to sigh. He had already questioned himself that plenty of time already. Not really, but I'm hoping he would be able to hold out until I send you after him. Now pay attention. The first of the forces are coming. Indeed, the sand and the sound shinobi had started entering the stadium. Naruto narrowed his eyes and made a half-ram sign. Kakashi watched curiously as a shadow clone popped into existence, with the same seriousness on his face. He watched as Naruto pulled out a scroll from his right hip pouch and handed it over to the clone. You know what to do. The clone nodded and vanished a moment later. Kakashi turned serious. What was that you gave to your clone, Naruto? And where is he going? Naruto gave him a smirk. Don't worry, sensei. Just a little help for our dear Hokage. Kakashi narrowed his eye, but let it go. He trusted Naruto not to do anything stupid in this situation. Alright, I'll trust you on this one. But first, you engage them with Guy. I'll join you in a moment and tell you when you have to go. Naruto nodded and almost flinched when Guy appeared by his side. Yosh. Let's go, Naruto. We'll show them the consequences of their unyouthfulness. Naruto just muttered, "Hi, whatever you say." The two of them vanished, appearing on the battlefield. Kakashi looked around. The Anbu were engaging the shinobi on the stands, providing cover for panicking civilians to escape and head to the shelters. He easily dealt with the two shinobi that were headed his way, slitting their throats within a minute. He looked over the stands, trying to find where his pink-haired student had crawled off to. He spotted her in the very back, and smiled. She had dragged the entirety of Team 10 with her in the back, in the hopes that they won't be discovered. He had to give it her. The girl had grown some balls to be able to get her comrades into a safe zone in the middle of the enemy. He stealthily made his way to her. Sakura. He was immensely proud when she immediately turned to face him, a kunai in hand. She immediately lowered the kunai. Kakashi-sensei. Don't scare me like that. Kakashi smiled, but then turned serious when Sakura asked him. Sensei. Do you know where Sasuke-kun and Naruto are? Kakashi contemplated on what to tell her. I know where Naruto is. Right now, but you don't worry about him right now. As for Sasuke, I've got a mission for you. Sakura blinked. A mission. XXXXXXX Hiruzen took note of the feathers falling as he turned his head towards the cage. The other man took the same action, and as their eyes met, a smoke bomb exploded on the balcony, hiding them from view. The Hokage's attendant yelled for him to run, but it was too late as a kunai buried itself in his chest. The cage leapt to the roof with the Hokage under his arm and a kunai to the old man's throat. A team of Anbu darted after them but had to turn as the Kazekage's attendants appeared behind them. With a quick slice the two men became four, but the pieces of the bodies didn't drop as they tossed off their cloaks, revealing four teens. The four now exposed Oto Nin quickly flashed through seals before pushing their palms out and naming their collaboration jutsu. Shishienjin. A purple wall came into existence in front of them, taking the shape of a cubic barrier. An Anbu was about to test the barrier when the voice of the Anbu captain rang out. Don't touch the shield, or you will burn, he said to the Anbu standing by his side. But Taicho, what about Hokage-sama? The captain grit his teeth and looked at the four Oto Nin holding up the barrier. He was not a fool. Whatever was going to happen inside the barrier, it would likely be something big and dangerous enough to kill the Hokage. If he attacked the Oto shinobi, there was a chance that the danger inside the barrier would be unleashed onto the village. He could not take that chance. Not to mention, the four nin had secondary barriers around themselves, the function of which they were unaware of. He had no idea how to release either of the barriers. Their odds were very, very bad. Guess we'll have to have some faith in our Hokage. XXXXXXX The clone watched from his hidden perch with calculative days as a purple barrier went up on the roof of the building of the cage box. So they decided to use that barrier. Not bad, he mused as the barrier went up as tall as almost 400 feet. Good thing the old man already has a mark on him. Otherwise, doing this would have been almost impossible, he remarked to himself as he flashed away. XXXXXXX Hiruzen glared at the smirking form of his former student. He had entirely expected this to happen, so he had worn his battle robes under his Hokage robes. Orochimaru. He whispered, ready for any trick his student might pull. Orochimaru noticed this and chuckled. It seems you expected all of this, sensei. It didn't miss my attention that the Konoha shinobi were rather, unusually tense. Orochimaru looked at the old, but determined form of his sensei and almost chuckled. Did he really think he would win against him today? He was already pushing himself at the age of 70, which was no age to be exerting yourself as a shinobi. Not to mention, he had a guaranteed success, with his newest ace in the hole. Orochimaru smirked deviously. Do you think you can defeat me at your age, sensei? Hiruzen ignored the taunt and said, this time you went really far, Orochimaru. It was my greatest mistake to let you escape that day, but no more. Today, you will die, even if I have to take you with me. Orochimaru asked curiously, where is all this courage coming from, sensei? Hiruzen was stoic and instantly replied, this is, my will of fire. As long as it burns strong within me, I can guarantee your defeat. You can never defeat someone whose will of fire burns strong. Orochimaru chuckled, which turned into a full laugh. What courage you display in the face of your death, sensei. But today, I'll show you just how weak your will of fire is, that is, when I extinguish it and raise this village to ashes. Hiruzen glared at him, and was about to attack when something flashed blue in his peripheral vision. He almost fell due to surprise. Naruto. What are you doing here? His heartbeat increased rapidly as he saw the blonde standing right beside him inside the barrier, facing Orochimaru. Before he could enter the state of outright panic, Naruto raised a hand. Don't worry, Hokage-sama. I'm just a clone. Orochimaru narrowed his eyes curiously as he set his eyes upon the blonde mystery that was Uzumaki Naruto. When he had first encountered the genin in the Forbidden Forest, he had been slightly impressed that the boy had been able to kill his summons with complete ease. Not only that, but he had formed an impressive tag team with the youngest Uchiha and managed to put him on the ropes. Now 1 month later, he had been surprised by the blonde, yet again, when he managed to learn and apparently, master the incredibly difficult and complex Hiraishin no Jutsu, the jutsu that earned the Yondaime his name of Yellow Flash. He then proceeded to best a Hyuga in Taijutsu, and utterly humiliate him. Not only that, but he managed to completely turn the tables on a Jinchuriki, without using his own Biju chakra. Here was a dangerous combination of genius, power and skill, that too at such a young age. Even Itachi hadn't shown such abilities at this age, and that guy was right up there with Orochimaru and the Yondaime in terms of being a genius. Right now, he curiously watched the interaction between his former sensei and the genin. Perhaps he was here to offer some help to the old fool. Hiruzen almost sagged in relief that the Naruto beside him was just a clone. No matter how powerful and talented Naruto was for his age, he was not ready to deal with the likes of Orochimaru just yet. So why are you here? The clone then pulled out a scroll and held it out to the old leader. Prime sent me to give you this. Hiruzen accepted the scroll with a raised eyebrow. Most probably, Prime was the original Naruto. What is it? The clone smiled. Some reinforcements, just in case. Use it only when things really get out of hand. Remember, he gave a look so serious that Hiruzen thought he might as well be looking at one of his senior Jonin. Prime is counting on you to use it, Hokage-sama. Don't disappoint him. The clone then vanished in a poof of smoke, leaving an amused Hokage, despite the situation he was in. Tucking the scroll securely on his waist, he turned to his equally amused student. He settled into the Sarutobi clan's taijutsu stance. Shall we begin then, my wayward student? XXXXXXX back down in the arena, it was a bloodbath. Suna and Oto Shinobi were on the ground, either dead or knocked out. But mostly dead. Guy and Naruto had almost been like a force of hurricane. Guy had tore through the forces with his powerful taijutsu, breaking bones and ending lives with only 1 or 2 hits. Naruto on the other hand, decided not to use the Hiraishin, instead choosing to rely on his flash step. With his tri-pronged kunai coated in wind chakra, combined with his speed, almost nobody escaped his slash. He also made full use of his ability of a slower perception. He was flash-stepping across the whole arena so fast that even a blur was difficult to spot. In a single flash step, Naruto would sometimes slash 2 enemies simultaneously, ending their lives in an instant. In a few seconds, it would be all over and a new group of shinobi would enter the arena, only to suffer the same fate as their dead comrades. This is getting kind of boring. Naruto muttered as he ended the life of another Oto shinobi. This was the 3rd batch he and Guy had taken care of, and Naruto was not impressed, at all. No shinobi was able to counter his speed. Before they could even begin thinking of a counter, Naruto would catch them off guard in their blind spot and slash. Dead. Everyone moved almost painfully slow for him to kill. I wonder if this is how Dad felt, being the fastest man alive. Naruto. Naruto turned around to catch the challenging grin of Guy-sensei. How many? Naruto internally sighed at how hyper the man was. He really did not see how one could be so hyped after killing so many shinobi. Still, he would humor the guy. 68, he replied after going over it in his mind for a second. The reaction from Guy caused him to flinch in alarm. Guy cried tears as he held up a fist. Oh. It seems I have been bested in count. Naruto looked at Guy as if he had started speaking Latin. Since when had this become a freaking competition? He slowly started freaking out as Guy began to make absurd promises of how he would do 5,000 push-ups if he lost again. If he couldn't do that, he would run 500 laps around the village on his hands. If he couldn't do that, alright, that's enough Guy. Kakashi's voice came as he jumped his way towards them. Kakashi landed right next to Naruto, who was blinking as if coming out of a trance. Kakashi gazed at Naruto with slight concern. Working with Guy for the first time can be a bit overwhelming. He knew that from first-hand experience. Leaning down a bit, he whispered in Naruto's ear, "You okay?" That seemed to do the trick, as Naruto shook his head to clear it, probably from the excess youthfulness. "Thanks," he murmured, but quickly added, "but don't think we are good. I'm still upset with you." Kakashi nodded to himself. He would have to correct his mistake with Naruto once this was all over. "We'll talk later then." Naruto nodded, putting his kunai back in his pouch. "So what am I doing now?" Kakashi first asked him, "Can you really handle the Ikibi as you are now? How much chakra have you left?" Naruto chuckled and patted his stomach with a fist. "Don't underestimate me, Kakashi-sensei. I've yet to fully spend even a quarter of my total reserves. I will manage. Now where am I going?" Kakashi smirked under his mask. He really does have ridiculous reserves of chakra, he mentally whistled. Outwardly, he spoke, "You are a censor, right?" Sasuke went in pursuit of the Sand siblings, so as a backup, I sent Sakura and Shikamaru to track him down with the aid of my summon, Pakun. Shikamaru probably had pursuers, so you'll meet him on your way to Sasuke. Meet up with him, track them down, and stop the Ikibi from rampaging the village. Naruto nodded, "Roger that." He placed 2 fingers on the ground and in just 2 seconds, he had the location of Shikamaru locked on his sensory radar. "Got you," he whispered. He stood up and leapt up to jump over the stadium wall. Kakashi sighed and turned to Guy, who looked like he was about to burst with joy upon seeing Naruto go. Before he could open his mouth, Kakashi pointed behind him towards the oncoming shinobi. He rushed past him and killed the first sound ninja. "Concentrate, Guy, otherwise you'll lose to me as well." Probably one of his many bad ideas, but really, who was counting? His instinct alerted him to something approaching at high speed, but not at him. It was approaching at the squad of enemy forces. He watched, fascinated, as a highly compressed ball of impacted right between the shinobi forces. It exploded with the compressed wind with great force, easily taking out 7 of the enemy shinobi. Kakashi looked up with his Sharingan to see Naruto standing on the wall, a smirk on his face. With a 2-fingered salute, he was gone in a flash step. Yosh. Let's go with our youth at full power. Yup, one of his bad ideas. XXXXXXX Shikamaru gulped down the water Asuma had offered him with greed. Dealing with the pursuers had been way too troublesome. Catching all 8 of them with his shadow, then finding out that one ninja was still not within his grasp had almost led to his death. He had tried to find out the hiding spot of the 9th ninja before his chakra ran out, freeing the shinobi from his grasp. Alas, he was too late and almost killed, had it not been for Asuma-sensei's timely arrival. Asuma had taken the 9th ninja out, preventing him from assisting his comrades. Then, he proceeded to help out Shikamaru by taking out the other 8 ninjas in just a few seconds. Shikamaru just muttered, "Troublesome," and just sat down to take a rest. Asuma smiled at his student as he sat on a log. "For your first time in deep enemy territory, that was not so bad, Shika." Shikamaru scowled at his sensei. "It would have been better if you had just done it without hiding like that. Exerting so much had been such a drag." Asuma snorted, but accepted it in stride. He had learnt long ago that Shikamaru was smart, but lacked the motivation to actually use those smarts in battle. Both the student and the teacher were lost in their own thoughts until they heard the telltale sound of a kunai whizzing through the air. Asuma prepared to tackle whatever enemy was coming, but was confused when the kunai landed on the ground in front of them rather than being thrown at them. Asuma immediately understood, while Shikamaru relaxed. A tri-pronged kunai. As soon as the kunai was lodged on the ground right before them, Naruto appeared in a blue flash, his grasp already on the thrown kunai. Asuma couldn't help but be amazed every time he watched that jutsu in action. To able to travel from one point to another in an instant, so fast that your enemy doesn't even have time to react would be devastatingly useful. Naruto pulled the kunai out of the ground and stood up. Once again, Asuma was astounded on seeing the similarities between Naruto and Namikaze Minato. The almost identical shade of hair, similar hairstyle, same shade of the eyes, the similar shaping of the face and the same, deadly expression on the face. Shikamaru straightened up out of instinct, even if there was no enemy around. Naruto exuded a dangerous aura right now, an aura that made it clear just who was in command. Even in the presence of a Jonin like Asuma, who had the most authority over Shikamaru, that aura was blazing like a star. Naruto turned to Shikamaru, a serious expression on his face. Shikamaru, you and Sakura were pursuing Sasuke, right? Shikamaru raised his hand and pointed behind him without a word, too bothered to even speak right now. Naruto nodded and made to move when Asuma's voice stopped him. What's the situation back in the stadium, Naruto? Naruto rose an eyebrow but replied, the Anbu have almost fully evacuated the civilians from the stadium and most likely, are in the process of escorting civilians all over the village to the shelters. Suna and Odo forces are swarming the stadium in groups. Me and Gai-sensei were taking out the forces until Kakashi-sensei switched with me and told me to pursue Sasuke. He said he had sent a team of Sakura and Shikamaru as backup in case things get bad for that impulsive idiot. Asuma thought over it a bit and asked, is there anything else? Naruto frowned and then lightened up. Oh. And your old man is fighting Orochimaru inside a barrier. His reply had the predicted result as both Shikamaru's and Asuma's eyes widened in shock. Oh Orochimaru. Wow. Didn't know Shikamaru was capable of stuttering like Hinata. Naruto turned to him. I didn't hesitate, did I? He watched as Asuma's expression changed to reflect his thinking on this piece of news. Just when Naruto was about to say something to ease the man a bit, all of them felt it, even if Shikamaru didn't know what it was. The unmistakable feeling of demonic chakra, washing over them like a wave of malice. Naruto mentally cursed. Shit. Things are getting serious on that end. I better get going. Turning to Asuma, who was looking in the same direction with narrowed eyes, he quickly said, Asuma-sensei. I better get going. I cannot afford to waste any more time here. Asuma's head snapped to Naruto, and it was a bit amusing to see the student and his sensei with identical expressions of disbelief. Why you surely don't mean you want to go over there, do you? Naruto narrowed his eyes, causing Asuma to tense up a bit. He did not have time for this. I have a way to stop whatever is going on over there. We can't afford to make things worse than they already are. I know what is going on, and I'm sure you do as well, Asuma-sensei. If you have a better option than Fuinjutsu, I would be happy to hear it. Asuma only looked at him with dead seriousness, if you're sure about this. As expected, Asuma did not have a reply for Naruto, nor did Shikamaru. Naruto nodded and turned to Shikamaru, hold out your arm. Shikamaru blinked, what for? Naruto sighed in annoyance, I don't have time for this at all. He forcefully grabbed Shikamaru's wrist and released it after a moment. Shikamaru looked down and curiously enough, there was something imprinted on his wrist. A seal formula, to be precise. He raised an eyebrow at Naruto. I'm guessing this is your Hiraishin marking. Naruto nodded and started walking away from them. If I find any one of ours in the way, I'll directly send them to you. It's best if you wait for 5 minutes before returning to the stadium, though. Shikamaru could hold it no more. Wait Naruto. You might be good, even Jonin level maybe, but this is too much. Naruto was touched how much the shadow user cared about him, but now was not the time. He waved a hand in his direction, not stopping from walking away. I'll be fine, Shika. If you want, have Asuma-sensei tell you why only I can do this. I give my permission for you to tell him, Asuma-sensei. Either that, or you can wait for me to tell you. Just remember though, it's a secret. It stays a secret until I say so, got it? With a flash step, he was gone. Jumping through the trees at a breakneck pace, he was just a blur to anyone saw him. He stopped though, when he saw an unconscious Shino on the ground. He jumped down, keeping an eye out for any enemies that might be waiting in an ambush. When he sensed none, he ran to the insect user to check his vitals. Kakashi didn't mention he had sent Shino as well. He's mostly fine, even if his breathing is rather quick. Also, the body does not twitch like that when unconscious, he deduced. Looking around, he glanced over at Shino's opponent, a knocked-out Kankuro. He glanced back to Shino. More specifically, the back of his elbow which has a senbon sticking out of it. He deftly plucked out the senbon and threw it away. Knowing how Suna favored its puppets, there was a possibility that the senbon might have poison coated on it when it stuck Shino. Better send him to Shikamaru, he thought. He was about to send him through the horizon when another thought struck him. Asuma and Shikamaru don't know that Shino was poisoned. What now? He stood up, carrying Shino in fireman style and vanished from the spot. Shikamaru and Asuma were about to head back to the stadium when Naruto arrived in a sudden blue flash. They automatically jumped back, tensed up for a fight, relaxing only when they saw who it was. Asuma gave a sigh of relief, but Shikamaru grumbled, "I won't ever get used to that." Naruto ignored that and handed Shino to Asuma, who asked, "What happened? I thought you were going after Gaara." Naruto informed him, "Had to personally get him to you. Pretty sure he has been poisoned by the puppeteer. You should get him to the hospital as quickly as you can." Asuma nodded, and as one, he and Shikamaru took to the trees, making haste on getting back. Naruto nodded as well and resumed on his way, making haste in response to the steadily growing aura of malice that the Biju chakra created. "You didn't mention the puppeteer to them," Kurama stated curiously, referring to the fact Naruto prevented the capture of an enemy. Naruto flippantly replied, "Gaara will thank me later for that." He knew he was getting closer. The burnt marks from Sasuke's fire style, the scratches on the trunks made by the claw that had formed on Gaara's body. However, it was a completely different story when he arrived at the scene. Crouching on a branch high above, he observed the scene carefully. Sasuke was barely standing on his legs, no doubt having exhausted himself by using jutsu after jutsu. He also had the curse mark spread all over him, showing that he had run out of juice a while ago, and now was relying on the power from the curse mark. And even that looked like it was running out. Sakura had been stuck onto a tree with sand, unconscious. But it seemed Gaara was not interested in her at all, so it was a bit better. A few branches away, Temari looked to be a bit better, if not in a similar condition such as Sasuke. She was breathing heavily, probably from having to fight off Sasuke to allow Gaara more time to recover. But she was injured as well, if her holding her left side tenderly was any indication. He turned his attention to Gaara and had to stop himself from gaping. Sand had fully covered his entire upper body, with only his feet remaining uncovered. His facial features had changed as well, becoming more animal-like, and his eyes resembled to that of his tailed beast, with the same seal marking on his body that Naruto had seen on the arm in the stadium. Now both his hands looked like giant claws, and his tail had also gotten somewhat bigger. Naruto narrowed his eyes. His transformation has progressed way more than I had anticipated. Taking him down in that form will be way more difficult than when he was only half covered with sand. But there has got to be something I can use. Some weakness has to be there in this form. He critically examined Gaara's transformation, looking for a weak spot. Okay, his entire upper body is covered in sand, both back and front, which means it is useless to attack those areas. They are likely reinforced with dense sand to be more durable. His hands are a no-go, he would smack me away with those. There is no point in attacking from a blind spot using Hiraishin since he is a tail to take care of that. His speed, strength and durability has likely increased beyond what they previously were as well. But his legs, they are uncovered. That is the only weak spot that I can see. Wait a second. His entire body above the origin point of his tail has been reinforced, but not below it. A smirk graced his features. He had found the place he needed to attack. The whole thought process didn't take more than 5 seconds. His danger sense rang out, bringing him out of his thoughts. His eyes went wide when he saw that Gaara was attacking not Sasuke, but his own sister. He then noticed that the positions of both of them seemed wrong from what he had seen 2 minutes ago. That son of a bitch. He used Kawarimi to avoid Gaara's attack. And knowing Gaara, he may not even care who he's attacking as long as he gets his blood. Oh, I'll have your hide for this, you asshole. Naruto was already moving from his spot, his danger sense slowing his perception to allow him to appropriately react. Gaara was laughing madly as he jumped from his branch, claw outstretched to tear Uchiha Sasuke apart. He did not even stop in confusion when the Uchiha was suddenly replaced by his sister. It only meant more blood for his mother. And plus, she was also among those who caused him pain. He would kill her and bath in her blood. Sasuke panted heavily as he knelt down on a knee. He had pulled the substitution off very close, and was running on fumes now. He felt a bit bad about using the girl as a replacement, but it eased him somewhat that Gaara was so clouded in his bloodlust that he failed to distinguish his enemy from his sister. One enemy less for him to deal with later, right? Temari had never been so much terrified in her life as she saw Gaara racing towards her. She had been pushed aside by Gaara earlier when he began his fight with the Uchiha. She had hit a tree trunk and had probably cracked some ribs. Deciding that it was better to rest rather than interfere in Gaara's fight, she sat down on a branch. She was resting when she felt a pull and suddenly, she was facing Gaara who looked like he wanted to tear her apart. It suddenly became clear to her. That bastard Uchiha had switched places with her. She was filled with grief that her life would end by her own little brother's hand, and in his bloodlusted state, he wouldn't even remember he killed his own sister. As she had read about how in your last moments, your entire life flashes in front of your eyes. That is exactly what happened to her right now. The last thought before Gaara almost got to her was of a certain, blue-eyed blonde. She closed her eyes tightly and waited for the pain to come. However, instead of pain, something suddenly grabbed her, causing her to open her eyes and involuntarily shriek in surprise. They moved, so fast that it was a blur, and the next thing she knew, she was a safe distance away from Gaara. I never had any siblings, but what I do know is you never, ever, attack your sister like that. The voice was almost shaking with rage. Her eyes shot open and she finally got a good look at her savior. Naruto had an expression of dead seriousness on his face as he looked at Gaara, with Temari in his hands. Never had he felt such cold fury before. First, the asshole he called a teammate had the nerve to substitute with Temari, and make her own brother kill her. Then, Gaara has the gall to almost kill his sister in cold blood. Rest assured, he would get his payback on Gaara right now. Sasuke would have to wait. Temari felt her face getting warmer as she found out that Naruto was carrying her bridal style. His right hand was behind her shoulders, clutching her so that her face was right next to his chest. His left hand was supporting her legs from behind her knees. She tried to move around a bit, tried to get him to drop her, but he took it as a sign of her being uncomfortable, and therefore readjusted her in his arms. Gaara grinned a maniac's grin. Uzumaki Naruto. She was one of those who caused me pain. Tell me, why shouldn't I kill her? Temari grimaced as Naruto tightened his hold on her at Gaara's response almost protectively, and dare she think it, possessively. Naruto turned to Sasuke, who was watching him with wide eyes of shock. Sasuke, I'll leave you to handle him for a few more moments. It's your fight, isn't it? Try not to lose until I return. In a flash step, he was gone. Sasuke gaped at the scene with total shock and disbelief. He just couldn't believe Naruto's speed. Gaara was an arm length away from tearing the girl to pieces when she had suddenly disappeared. Even Sasuke with his Sharingan had only caught a blonde blur. When the blur had settled down on a branch, he got his first good look at who it was. And he was blown away. Naruto had not only tracked him down, but had gotten here in just enough time to save the enemy from Gaara. Why would he want to save the enemy? It just didn't make sense for him. Then Naruto told him to hang in here until he gets the girl to a safe place. Just whose side is he on anyway? Can't he see how he was running empty here? He turned back to Gaara. No use complaining now. He would just have to wait until Naruto got here. He hated to admit it, but Gaara was on a totally different level than him. His fire style was useless, his taijutsu was null against the transformed Gaara, and the sand monster was unusually strong to have tanked his Chidori. The bastard had forced him to use it 3 times, while his limit was only 2. Speaking of Gaara, his chakra had become a crushing, malicious force. If Sasuke hadn't felt it before, he would have been frozen in fear. As it was, he had felt a similar chakra from Naruto back in Wave, when he had shielded Naruto from the Ice Senbon. Did that mean Naruto was somehow related to Gaara, since their chakra had some similarities? He shook his head. Now was not the time to delve into chakra theory. He was almost completely out of chakra, so he could no longer attack effectively. He would have to stall Gaara long enough for Naruto to return. Naruto had handled Gaara with relative ease, but he doubted Naruto could handle Gaara when he was like this. XXXXXXX Naruto had tree-hopped until they were a good distance away from the fight. A hand came to rest on his chest. My side, Temari whispered with an expression of pain. Naruto blinked and then grimaced. Sorry, he whispered back, loosening his hold a bit. Once he was sure that they were almost a mile away from the fight, he jumped back to the ground and settled Tamari at the base of a tree. Tamari shifted until the weight was off her left side and relaxed a bit. Looking up at Naruto, she almost expected him to finish her off. But instead, she found him looking at her with concern. As if killing her was the last thought on his mind. Are you alright? Tamari frowned suspiciously at him. You won't be killing me. To her surprise, Naruto snorted and knelt down beside her. What makes you think I want to kill you? Tamari tilted her head with narrowed eyes, the fact that I'm your enemy. Seeing that Tamari still refused to drop her guard around him, he sighed and said softly, Tamari, I can never bring myself to kill you. Tamari's eyes softened as she easily heard the genuine truth in that statement. Naruto wanted to grasp her hand to comfort her, to feel her comfort, but he was on a tight schedule. Tamari, he called her. When he had her attention, he said, you know that I need to stop Gaara. He's your village's Jinchuriki, so you guys must know of a way to stop him from going on a rampage. I need to know what it is. Tamari shook her head, you can't. It's a tailed beast, a demon of epic proportions, nothing can stop it. It's impossible. Naruto smirked softly and flicked her nose playfully. He grinned as a surprised blush came over her face as she rubbed it. I'll have you know that a word like that doesn't exist for me. That's a word for people who have run out of ideas. The temporary playful mood once again turned somber as Naruto whispered. No way, you say. He then stood up, looking in the direction of the fight. He sighed with resignation as his dead expression came over his face, then I have no option left. Tamari's head shot up at that statement, eyes wide with terror. Her hand shot out to grasp Naruto's, who turned to look at her with a quizzical expression. What? Tamari felt tears pricking her eyes, and as much as she tried to stop them, they flowed out anyway. If you are going to stop him, don't kill him, please. He's my brother, she pleaded with tears flowing down her face. Even if Gaara was homicidal, he was her little brother. She couldn't bear the thought of him dying, at someone like Naruto's hand no less. Naruto's expression softened at her tears. There was no way he could leave her like this. He knelt down once again and with the thumb of his other hand, he softly wiped her tears away. Please don't cry, Haim. It's so difficult for me to see you like this. And whenever did I say that I was going to kill him? Tamari did not protest at all as Naruto wiped her tears away. She could use a bit of some external comfort. She felt herself calm down a bit as Naruto rubbed her hand tenderly. Naruto wiped all her tears away and brought up their joint hands. I promise you, Tamari. Gaara won't die today. Kissing her hand once, he got up and turned away. In a stronger voice, he announced, I'll just smack some sense into him is all. He was gone in a blue flash. Tamari stared at the spot before shaking her head with a small smile. She reached into her hip pouch and took out some medical supplies. As she tended to her side, she muttered with a fond smile, Baka. She wholeheartedly believed Naruto would stop her brother without killing her. XXXXXXX Naruto flashed back to the tree he had put his mark on. He took stock of the situation and nodded, satisfied. His teammate had managed to survive against Gaara in his absence. Sasuke frantically dodged Gaara's sand claw. Just where was Naruto? Gaara screamed, why are you running, Uchiha Sasuke? Come face me. Sasuke was about to snap back a reply when another voice called, how about resuming our fight from earlier, Gaara? Both Gaara and Sasuke turned towards the direction of the voice. Sasuke released a long breath of relief while Gaara seemed to get pumped up even more. There was Naruto, standing on a branch with one hand by his side and the other twirling a tri-pronged kunai by its ring. A confident smirk graced his features as he looked Gaara in the eye, not at all unnerved by his toothy grin. Gaara said in a low voice, excellent suggestion, Uzumaki Naruto. Let's make each other feel alive. The last part was shouted in glee as he prepared to attack. Naruto's expression turned serious, and he turned to Sasuke. Sasuke immediately straightened up from the look, though he didn't know why. Get out of here and to a safe distance Sasuke, and keep Sakura safe while you're at it. I doubt you can fight any more in your current condition. That was all he said before turning his attention back to Gaara. Sasuke wanted to snap at him for dismissing him like that, but he was smart enough to not do that in the middle of such a fight. Ever since he had begun fighting Gaara, he felt that somehow, Gaara was growing stronger in their fight. He seemed to have a crap ton of chakra like Naruto, while Sasuke had steadily run out of chakra in their fight. Even Chidori had been useless as for it to work, you had to be extremely fast, faster than your opponent and catch him off guard. One of those conditions was sadly negated. Partially due to his own stupid bravado of wanting to face Gaara in the open. Also, Sasuke had struck only sand, which had reformed, causing no real damage to Gaara. He was more than glad to let Naruto take over. Retreating to a safe distance, he settled to observe Naruto fight. Naruto jammed the kunai in his hand on the branch he was standing on. He put his hands in both of his pouches and in 3 quick draws, he scattered all the remaining Hiraishin kunai all over the area. Gaara seemed unaffected by this development, while Sasuke was closely examining one of the kunai that had lodged right in front of him. Was this the reason Naruto was able to get from one place to another in almost an instant? He looked around, and upon seeing Naruto was concentrating on Gaara, he deftly took the lodged kunai out and put it in his pouch. He would examine it later. Naruto pulled out the kunai he had jammed near him and took a stance. He already had set up his field, all he had to do was get Gaara into position. He channeled wind chakra into his kunai and jumped at Gaara, deliberately going slow enough so Gaara would be able to aim his attack at him. Sure enough, Gaara did exactly as he wanted him to. Soon a shuriken. A hail of shuriken made of sand came racing towards him while he was in midair. He flashed to one of his kunai at the last second, right above Gaara. The sand shuriken completely missed their targets, crashing into some trees behind where Naruto was standing. Gaara looked around, trying to find out where Naruto had vanished to. Oi! The call made him look upwards, where Naruto was crouched upside down. He waved cheekily at Gaara before vanishing once again. This time, he appeared right in front of Gaara, who snarled and made a hand sign. Multiple mouths appeared all over his body, which took a deep breath as one. Fuden. Mugen Sajin Daitapa. Wind style. Infinite sand dust storm. A huge dust storm blew towards Naruto, who simply flashed to another kunai, which was on a tree behind Gaara. Gaara grit his teeth and once again looked around to find Naruto. Are you that incompetent? You can't even catch me with your eyes, let alone your jutsu. Gaara whipped around and sure enough, Naruto was standing on a branch with a taunting grin. Gaara's tolerance finally snapped. He was used to playing around with his stronger opponents before crushing them to death. But this time, his opponent was playing with him and was brave enough to taunt him. He would show him just who he was messing with. With a roar, he jumped towards Naruto with the intent of tearing him into pieces right where he was standing. Naruto grinned. Gaara was so easy to rile up. Jamming his kunai on the ground between his legs, he fell into a stance as if preparing to tackle Gaara. Just when Gaara's claw was about to make contact with his face, he flashed to another kunai, away from Gaara. Sasuke watched with awe and jealousy as Naruto neatly avoided all of Gaara's attacks, looking at complete ease. It seemed that the seal on the kunai was some sort of beacon for Naruto to flash to. Whatever it was, Sasuke was sure to crack it later for himself. If he could learn the secrets of that kunai, he would be able to fight on par with Naruto. Turning his attention back to the fight, Naruto seemed to be waiting for Gaara to summon into a specific position, and if Sasuke knew one thing about his teammate, it was that Naruto was a master at setting traps up. He watched with anticipation as Gaara snapped and bodily rushed at Naruto, intent on crushing him by himself. Naruto dropped the kunai and looked as if he was preparing to engage Gaara hand to hand. At the last second, he flashed to one of his kunai, neatly dodging Gaara's attack. Just what was the blonde planning? Naruto smirked as Gaara released a roar of frustration as he once again missed him. He took out a regular kunai, wrapping a regular explosive tag around it. After all, he only wanted to weaken his armor. He made a promise to Temari to not kill her brother. He would be breaking that promise if he blew Gaara's ass to chunks with one of his own tags. Nasty. Anyways, he flashed back, this time, right behind Gaara. Without waiting for his tail to react, Naruto jabbed the kunai on a spot right below his tail. Right here. Gaara reacted to the poke first, then the voice. As soon as he heard the voice, he immediately swung his tail to smack Naruto away, but Naruto was no longer there. Naruto had flashed to a kunai a few trees away, grinning at the blast that covered Gaara. He felt Sasuke land beside him, saying in disbelief, You poked him in the ass, with an explosive kunai. Naruto scowled and turned to him. It worked, didn't it? I don't see why you are complaining. He then turned around, looking at the giant remnant of a sand claw grabbing Sakura in what looked to be a very painful hold. He stepped to the claw and placed a palm against it. Yep, it was rock solid. To Sasuke's amazement, Naruto seemed to channel red lightning onto the sandy rock. He was about to stop him, telling him that he might hit Sakura with her lightning, when cracks appeared in the claw around Sakura. It then shattered, freeing Sakura. Naruto caught her before she could faceplant on the branch. He handed her to an open-mouthed Sasuke. How did you that? Naruto waved a hand. Not the time, Sasuke. Maybe later. He then flashed away to a kunai that was on the tree right before the one on which the explosion occurred. He whistled, thoroughly impressed at the results of the explosion. The entire right half of Gaara's armor had collapsed, and the other half was barely holding on. Naruto wasted no time in seizing this chance. Ever since he arrived in this area, he had dispersed a moderate amount his own chakra in the air. Grasping that chakra, he entirely converted it to water. Dog Tiger, Suidan. Dai Suigaten no Jutsu. Water Style. Great Water Fang Projectile. Just as it had happened with Jiraiya, a huge spinning drill of water took form behind Naruto, going above him and rushing down towards a dumbstruck Gaara. He was so focused on recovering and reforming his armor that the water drill had caught him completely off guard. He couldn't even move when the drill crashed into him right into his stomach, with brutal force. To Naruto's immense satisfaction, Gaara impacted the ground with such force, that when the drill finally dispersed, Gaara had been buried into the ground in a crater that was shaped like his own body. All the sand that had been reformed had dispersed from his body, even the sand that was left after the explosion. The only thing that indicated that Gaara was still using his Biju chakra were his eyes. Naruto narrowed his eyes, and the kanji for the 5 elements seal once again formed on his fingertips. He dropped down from the branch, hand once again outstretched. Gaara was angry and confused. Uzumaki had once again put his sand out of commission. He was now dropping from the branch, heading towards him with his hand outstretched and his fingertips glowing. His mother was shouting in his head to do something. Gaara. I want him dead. Use my power, and crush him for good. Give me his blood. All the stress, attacks from Naruto, his failed attempts to draw blood and patience going towards negative finally did it for Gaara. I won't lose to you, Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto was within 5 meters from Gaara's now exposed stomach when his danger sense rang haywire. He instinctively flashed to the farthest kunai, which surprisingly turned out to be Temari. Temari jumped when Naruto suddenly appeared beside her. She put a hand on her chest, heart pumping wildly. You really shouldn't startle people like that. Naruto shot back, that's the only purpose I do it. What are you doing here anyways? I thought you were injured. His gaze turned quizzical. Temari folded her arms. I was able to heal myself with the medical supplies I had and what little I knew of medical jutsu. Truthfully speaking, she was downright impressed with the way Naruto had handled Gaara. Not many knew of the weak spot Naruto had chosen to exploit. Most of the times, they were busy escaping Gaara's attempts to kill them. Naruto had not only bested Gaara's attacks, but had managed to corner him. Twice. Naruto nodded and turned back where Gaara was. It seemed he had flashed for good reason, for Gaara was no longer there. In his place, a huge raccoon made of sand stood, towering clear above the forest. They seemed like ants in its comparison. A huge amount of chakra had been molded, right before Naruto had flashed away. Naruto stared at the one-tailed tanuki with unusually grave eyes. This is quite bad, he muttered. Temari gave him a look like he had lost his mind, quite. This is very, very bad. You can't stop him when he goes into this form. Suddenly, Naruto turned around and blocked a shuriken that was meant for Temari. Sasuke appeared one branch away, clearly angry. What are you doing, Naruto? She is the enemy. Naruto held a hand to calm the Avenger down. She isn't our enemy anymore, Sasuke. Don't attack her. Sasuke's expression turned confused. What do you mean? Naruto then tilted his head towards the giant tanuki. We have bigger problems to deal with, that's why. Sasuke grit his teeth and angrily gestured to the tanuki. How the hell are you going to stop that? Naruto then turned away and looked up, all 3 of them tensing when he saw its head turning to face them. He quickly said, both of you, get away from here as far and as fast as you can. Temari spoke the question before Sasuke did, what about you? Naruto gave her a discreet wink, whispering, trust me. Out loud, he spoke, I have a plan. Now go. Sasuke looked reluctant to leave Naruto behind, so did Temari. But they still followed his command. Sasuke turned around and tree-hopped away, Sakura safe in his arms. Temari was about to go as well when Naruto whispered to her, keep a safe distance from Sasuke. Even though I told him not to attack you, he still might do it. Temari nodded and was about to jump when she noticed she couldn't move. Naruto and her both looked down in horror to see both of their feet stuck in sand, with the sand crawling up their bodies. Naruto acted on instinct. He quickly put a hand on Temari's back and sent her to the farthest point he could, which he sensed was moving away. He had no time to ponder on that because he was completely covered by sand. Gaara watched in his Biju form from above as he finally had Uzumaki Naruto in his grasp, and this time, there was no escape. He clutched his claw into a fist. Sabaku Q. Sand coffin. Usually when he used the desert coffin, blood would explode outwards, along with the muscles and organs. It always gave Gaara great pleasure to use it. But this time, instead of blood, only smoke seemed to come out. Gaara was confused. Why did smoke come out? Temari had been utterly surprised when one moment, she was standing beside Naruto, her feet stuck in sand. The next moment, she had suddenly appeared mid-air beside Uchiha Sasuke. Sasuke was equally surprised, and nearly lost his footing on the next branch. Temari was barely able to land on her legs, let alone make a graceful landing. Temari was not so surprised, since she had witnessed Naruto send Shikamaru down for their fight the same way, using Hiraishin. Sasuke on the other hand, was stunned on a much higher level. He can even send people through that jutsu. If he sent her here, does he know that I have one of his kunai? Did Naruto send you? Temari looked at Sasuke and scowled. For some reason, she hated that bastard. Yeah, he did. However, all her breath left her lungs when she heard the gravelly voice of Gaara, amplified in his Biju form. Sabaku Q. No, Temari thought with eyes full of terror as she turned back to the area of the fight. She almost expected Naruto to flash beside her, easily avoiding the one-hit kill. Seconds trickled by, and the blood fully drained from her face. Gaara had killed Naruto. Sasuke froze on the branch for a completely different reason. While he had undoubtedly displayed potent jealousy towards Naruto for having techniques far superior to his own, he still considered Naruto his comrade, and Naruto was the closest thing to a friend that Sasuke had. Back in the stadium, his thoughts had been clouded with hatred and jealousy. But while fighting Gaara, the cloud had somewhat shifted, and he had gained respect for the blonde to handle Gaara the way he did. Naruto may have been a genius, but that alone doesn't make you powerful. Sasuke trained his ass off daily to get stronger. For Naruto to be this strong, he must have worked way harder than him. Which meant only one thing. Sasuke would do anything he could to catch up to Naruto. Anything. But witnessing the death of that comrade made him reflect back to their bell test. Kakashi had told them that people who broke the rules are scum, but those who abandon their comrades are worse than scum. He had abandoned Naruto to face his death, even if the blonde had told him to go himself. Itachi had abandoned the entire Leaf and by extension, his comrades. Sasuke had abandoned his comrade. Oh God, did that mean they were the same? Before more horror could fill his being, a scream of horror from Temari snapped him out of his thoughts. Naruto. Temari wanted to deny all of it. She wanted to deny that Naruto had fallen prey to Gaara's sand, but the truth was right in front of her, as if mocking her for not being able to do anything. She had these strange feelings growing inside her ever since she started meeting Naruto in the week before the exams. Feelings that she couldn't make any sense out of. She didn't meet him just because she wanted to learn his secrets for her village, no. She genuinely enjoyed spending time with him. He had become a sort companion that she never wanted to let go of, but reality struck hard. Naruto. Suddenly, a huge amount of smoke appeared before them, causing both of them to gape. The amount of smoke released was large, easily large enough that it could cover the giant tanuki. Only, it wasn't a tanuki that emerged from the smoke. XXXXXXX Naruto barely been able to make a shadow clone in time. However, He did it so fast that he doubted someone could have seen him doing it, even if they were standing in front of him. He had created the shadow clone with specific orders in mind. As soon as the clone flickered into existence, it vanished from its spot near instantaneously, Flash stepping behind a tree. Then, it substituted with the Prime, taking his place inside the coffin. It grinned when he thought what Gaara's reaction would be when he saw that Prime had managed to escape. It was its last thought before dispelling into smoke. Behind a tree, Naruto was preparing his next technique. It was the only one he could think of that could deal with Gaara's current form, and hopefully, it would be one of the last he would ever have to use against Gaara. Cutting his left thumb, he swiped it against his right palm. Boar dog bird monkey ram. Kuchio's no jutsu. Before the exam, he had calculated that he required exactly a quarter of his reserves to summon Takeshi. However, after Kurama had increased his reserves, the amount had dropped significantly. The quarter of his previous amount of reserves that he previously required had now become 2/3 of the same quarter, which meant an entire 1/6 of his reserves. Of course, Naruto had roughly estimated this with Kurama's help. In a huge blast of smoke, Naruto towered above the tree line, easily standing a head above the tanuki on top of Takeshi's head. He had his arms crossed as he looked down on Shukaku's form. It gave him a sense of authority, of power. Takeshi blinked as he appeared with his arms crossed. He quickly deduced that Naruto had summoned him. Ah, it seems you require my assistance, Naruto. Naruto lightly laughed on top of Takeshi's head. Very acute observation, Takeshi-san. Takeshi chuckled at his summoner's cheek before turning a serious, yet still a bit amused eye forward. Ikibi no Shukaku, huh? You sure to have an eye for strong opponents, Naruto. This might turn out to be a good fight after all. Takeshi grinned, his sharp teeth menacingly coming into view as he grasped the katana strapped onto the left side of his waist in anticipation. Naruto nodded and explained his plan to the boss of the foxes. Right now, the Jinchuriki is in the final state of his transformation, but still in control. Our goal is to influence him enough that he would relish the control over to the tailed beast via falling asleep. Once Shukaku's consciousness is in control, I want you to hold him in one place while I wake up the host. Once Gaara is awake, I will slap a seal onto him that will cut him off from his tailed beast. Takeshi listened carefully to Naruto's plan, and nodded in agreement. He couldn't help but comment, however, fighting an opponent like Shukaku at their strongest. You really know how to bring excitement into a fight, Naruto. Takeshi was clearly excited to fight. He did not wait for his opponent to make his move. Naruto was glad he had stuck to Takeshi's head using his chakra, otherwise he would have fallen backwards on his butt. Just as Takeshi came within striking distance, Gaara reacted. Shukaku's arm came forward to grab Takeshi's throat, but he wasn't fast enough. Instead of dodging the arm, Takeshi unsheathed his katana and in one clean stroke, Gaara's entire right arm came straight off. XXXXXXX Tamari stared in amazement at what Naruto had managed to pull out of his sleeve this time. It was a humongous, dark blue fox in a white haori, with 7 tails swaying behind magnificently. And it was large enough to tower over the tanuki. What is that? She uttered in disbelief. Was it one of Naruto's summons? Sasuke was in a similar state. He was at a loss of words for this, whatever Naruto had managed to pull off. But whatever it was superior to even the tanuki in size. It was clearly very strong. The 7 swaying tails had fully thrown him off. With the exchange of words that followed, Sasuke was able to deduce that this was a summon, which meant that Naruto was the holder of a summoning contract. He couldn't hear what Naruto said, but it was clearly a signal to start fighting. Both Sasuke and Tamari then proceeded to watch, utterly dumbstruck and stupefied. The giant blue fox cleanly cut one of Gaara's arms. XXXXXXX Takeshi skidded away, destroying a group of trees in his wake and not even noticing. His eyes narrowed as he clutched his blade tightly. His body is denser than I had thought. I nearly lost the grip of my blade, he said as he put the katana back in its sheath. We'll have to be more careful now. This should be provocation enough for him to let Shukaku out. Get ready, Naruto. Yeah. Naruto nodded and braced himself. He carefully watched Gaara as he slowly reattached his arm. Once he had done so, he turned his head towards them. Interesting, he rumbled, causing both Takeshi and Naruto to tense. How interesting, Uzumaki Naruto. They watched as Gaara came out of the giant tanuki's head in a ripple, his eyes completely white. Naruto supposed that was because his sight was in the tanuki's eyes. He was slumped, but slowly straightened up. Naruto was further on guard when he saw Gaara smiling a little. He knew what came next, but no matter how many times he saw Gaara smile, it was always unnerving. You are strong, Uzumaki, Gaara said, and Naruto could hear anticipation in his voice. You have matched my every attack with yours, and were able to overpower me, if only for a little while. I haven't had this much fun in all my life. The last shout caused Naruto to feel a bit sad inside. He couldn't help but reflect that this was how he could have ended up. Gaara had been alienated most of his life. He could see that only Temari had attempted to make Gaara feel as close to family as possible, but he had ruthlessly pushed her away. They say that you can learn a lot about a person from fighting them, and it was true. Naruto had seen how Gaara fought. Gaara only fought for himself. He thought that he had no precious people of his own. Well, Naruto was about to give him a smackdown for free, in addition to a reality check. Gaara formed the ram seal. As my gratitude towards you for keeping me entertained, I'll let you see the full power of the sand incarnation. Feigning sleep jutsu. For a moment, Gaara remained frozen in that pose, mad eyes glaring into Naruto's prepared ones. And then, he sagged, arms hanging limply as his head fell forward. Here we go, Takeshi-san, Naruto whispered to the fox, who hummed low in agreement. XXXXXXX Sasuke shivered with a little fear. This wasn't the first time he had watched his teammate take on a stronger opponent than any of them, while he just cowered in the background. Looking up at Gaara's form, he took back his words. Gaara had a lot more chakra than what he estimated. To have enough chakra to form a construct like that, he doubted even Naruto had that much chakra. Temari watched fearfully as Naruto tackled Gaara at his strongest. As confident as Naruto seemed, she doubted he could scrape victory when Gaara let Shukaku out to fight. But Naruto looked so sure of his victory, like he knew exactly what to do, that Temari simply had to trust he knew what he was doing. She couldn't bear to lose both Naruto and Gaara in the same day. XXXXXXX, Yahoo! Finally, I am out and free. The one-tailed monster opened its enormous jaw, and the high, crazy voice surprised Naruto a bit. He had been imagining a voice similar to Kurama's. Shukaku looked in front of him and cheered, coiling in preparation for an attack. Oh. A guy for me to kill already. And it looks like you're related to that asshole Kyuubi. I'll make mincemeat out of you. Naruto winced as Kurama roared in rage inside him. He really couldn't be sure if Shukaku was referring to him or Takeshi. Probably Takeshi. You know, because of his tails. Takeshi gave a challenging grin full of teeth. Why don't you put those words to test? Let's see how far you can get. Shukaku slapped his large, bloated stomach. Fuuton, Renkudan. A bullet of air so compressed and pressurized came shooting towards Takeshi, who surprised both Naruto and Shukaku when he deftly used one of his tails to smack away the air bullet at just the right angle. He just shifted its direction a bit, so instead of damaging the landscape, it went flying into the sky behind him. My turn, Takeshi grinned before performing three-hand seals, ending on Tiger. He took a deep breath. Kaden, Goen no Jutsu. Fire style. Great flame technique, an enormous vortex of rapidly expanding flames expelled from his mouth and rushed towards Shukaku. The heat from the flames was so hot that even Naruto, who was standing behind the wall of fire, felt it. The entire land of forest beneath the majestic flame was scorched to ashes. Naruto was willing to bet that the fire was hot enough to turn Shukaku's sand to glass. Shukaku, as soon as he saw the Herculean fire heading towards him, erected a huge wall of sand with his hand. He would have dodged it normally, but because of his huge bulk, he was slow to put himself to motion. It was better to have a hand turned to glass rather than any other part of his body. The flames hit the wall of sand, and for a full 5 seconds, Takeshi kept pumping chakra into his fire, making it hotter in each second. When he finally released the jutsu, both Naruto and Takeshi grinned at the results. XXXXXXX Temari gaped in speechlessness as the wall that Shukaku had erected with his hand had completely melted into hot, molten liquid. The amount of firepower that summon seemed to have was completely absurd and ridiculous. Sasuke was also dumbstruck at the new development. The heat from the summons fire had been hot enough to be felt way over where they were standing. He had seen what had happened to the forest beneath it, and he almost felt bad for anything standing in front of it. XXXXXXX Shukaku winced as he saw his entire hand was now molten sand, which was slowly melting from the solid shape that he had formed it into. However, before he could do anything about it, he heard another shout. Fuuton, kamikaze. Wind style. Divine wind, a huge amount of wind was expelled from Takeshi's mouth. It had no shape, it simply was wind blowing at great speeds. Since the sand construct was still melting, Shukaku didn't have enough time to detach himself from it. Takeshi took full advantage of it and chose to cool down the molten sand, transforming it into glass. Shukaku looked at his hand in disbelief. His whole right arm, that was still attached to his body, had become solid glass. It was rather surreal to see. Takeshi laughed, "Make mincemeat out of me. Take a look at yourself first." And with speed that even Naruto did not expect from him, he shot forward in 3 quick strides. Naruto was stunned just how quickly Takeshi was able to move. However, his next choice of attack almost had Naruto jumping in joy. Takeshi had reared back his fist and punched right at the strange-shaped wall of glass. Shukaku had no choice but to block the punch with his now wall of glass, formerly wall of sand. If he could get rid of the glass, he could form a new hand then. Then, he would kill this blasted fox. The glass shattered like, well, glass. It shattered into pieces, the part of the arm that had become glass was almost up to his shoulder. So almost the entire arm shattered under the tremendous force of Takeshi's punch. Shukaku was now visibly panicking. He swung his good left arm, claws outstretched to swipe Takeshi's head off, but Takeshi was quick to counter. Takeshi grabbed the left arm with his right, followed by grabbing the swinging tail that came from Shukaku's right. Takeshi held them in a strong grip, not allowing Shukaku any chance to attack. Well, if you don't count the regenerating arm and the purple ball of no doubt, highly destructive chakra that was forming in front of Shukaku's mouth, aimed right onto Takeshi's alarmed face. Do it now, Naruto. You really don't want to be at the other end of that thing. Takeshi's warning had a high amount of urgency in it, and Naruto did not want to find out what that ball of chakra did, so he didn't hesitate to act. He directed his chakra into his legs and jumped high. With a grunt, he threw the kunai downwards, aiming it so it lodged right in front of an asleep Gaara. As expected, Gaara's sand came up to catch the kunai, but it was of no consequence. Naruto flashed right in front of Gaara, already in motion of an attack. He caught Gaara's jaw in an earth-shattering right hook, which had so much force behind it that it not only sent Gaara leaning towards his own right, but also knocked a tooth out of his mouth. Wake the fuck up. The punch sent waves of pain to Gaara's brain, forcing him to wake up. His eyes flew open in agony, just as Naruto sensed the big ball of chakra harmlessly dispelling behind him. Shukaku's yell soon followed, "No. I just came out." Gaara was now wide awake, but Naruto gave him no chance to attack him with his sand. He used his left hand to roughly grab Gaara by his throat, bringing his face level to his. His fingertips of the right hand lit up in the Gogyo Fuin 5 elements seal for the 3rd time in the day. He slapped them right onto Gaara's exposed stomach, the usage of chakra making his seal visible. Gaara gasped as all the breath left him, and he momentarily became unconscious. Naruto had successfully managed to cut Shukaku off from Gaara's conscious. The sand form beneath them began to crumble, and just in seconds, the entire body of sand collapsed, making them plummet to earth. Naruto and Gaara would have hit the ground with bone-breaking force, if Naruto hadn't managed to grab Gaara midair and flash to a kunai on the ground. He carefully set Gaara against a tree, and was slightly taken aback when Gaara started to stir. He himself had needed a day to wake up when Orochimaru had slapped him with the same seal. Perhaps it was that due to Gaara's stronger connection to Shukaku, he already had large amounts of Biju chakra in his system which helped him wake. Naruto stood over Gaara as the redhead fully opened his eyes. Looking disoriented for a second, his eyes widened as he saw Naruto standing over him with an expressionless look on his face. He tried to shift further into the tree. "No, stay away from me," he cried weakly, far too weak to try and move his body. He watched with pure fear as Naruto knelt down. Naruto softened the look on his face. That pain, of being alone, of your life not meaning anything to anyone, I know that pain all too well, Gaara. Gaara whispered in confusion, how? Naruto's lips twisted into a sad smile, because we are alike. I also house a beast like yours. Gaara's confused expression twisted into one of shock. Then, for all those people, why? Naruto put a hand on Gaara's tuft of hair, because I found people to care for, to protect, who loved me and acknowledged my existence. Those people told me as many times I needed to hear, that they loved me. They told me that my purpose in this world was to protect. True power doesn't come from fighting for yourself. It comes when you have someone of your own to protect. Gaara, he ruffled the red hair, you have people like that too. If you'd just give them a chance, they would accept you. If you want, I'll be your first friend. Gaara was unable to answer, just staring at Naruto with wide eyes. Naruto chuckled and removed his hand, standing up. They were here anyways. Temari and Kankuro appeared just beside Gaara. The difference was that Kankuro was injured, and still on guard when standing in front of Naruto. He looked at Naruto with a wary expression, knowing that he stood no chance against a guy who still didn't look that exhausted after outright crushing Gaara. Temari on the other hand, just stared at Naruto with wide eyes. He had delivered on his promise. He had stopped Gaara without killing him. And she was grateful to him for that. Naruto looked at her and winked. I promised you, didn't I? Temari smiled softly and nodded. She was grateful that Gaara hadn't been killed, along with the fact that Gaara hadn't managed to kill Naruto. She didn't know if she could ever repay Naruto for what he had done for her. A hand brushed against her leg, causing her to look down. Temari, Kankuro. That's enough, let's go home, Gaara ordered weakly. Kankuro gave a confused look to Temari, who just nodded to comply with the request. He picked Gaara up, supporting him with one hand around his waist and the other holding Gaara's over his shoulder. Kankuro, Temari said, causing the puppeteer to look at her, take Gaara and move. I'll catch up. She did not once break eye contact with Naruto. Kankuro gave her a confused look, but Temari, go, I said. Kankuro looked reluctant to leave her behind, but obeyed her nonetheless. He took to the trees and in a few moments, they were just a dot in the distance. No doubt, Kankuro would wait ahead for her to catch up, but he knew when Temari wanted him to be out of sight, and he wasn't stupid enough to disobey her. Naruto just kept his hands in his pockets as Temari stepped closer. Somehow, he wasn't surprised at all when Temari suddenly grabbed him in a tight hug, her hands going around his waist and her head buried in his chest. Thank you, she was sobbing in his chest. Naruto slowly wrapped his own arms around her shoulders. He kissed her head softly, stroking her hair. It's okay, he whispered. He really didn't know what else he could do. Temari tightened her hold on him, why would you go so far for him? Naruto breathed deeply, trying to decide what to say. He and I, were not much different. We both share a burden, and we both have been alone in our lives. Me not as much as him. I just couldn't bear to look at him like he was. He is what I would have been if I had no people of my own. He has people of his own. He has me and Kankuro. Naruto nodded sadly, but he chose to push you away, while I accepted the few people I had in my life. It's still not too late, Temari. Just keep showing him what love truly means, and he will come to you. Give him another chance to accept. Temari slowly looked up to him with tears glistening in her eyes. Naruto slowly removed his arms from her, stepping back. You should go now. Konoha Shinobi might be here any moment. Temari pursed her lips, but nodded. She turned away, about to jump to the trees, but she hesitated. Naruto waited for Temari to jump away, but she looked hesitating. Temari, he never finished his sentence, for a pair of lips came to softly rest on his own. Naruto looked shocked only for a moment, but before he could wrap his arms around her, Temari separated and turned away, taking to the trees. Naruto's hand came to rub on his lips, feeling the taste of her own. He smiled. There was something else in that kiss. Something that promised a better future. Still smiling, he turned around, only to freeze on spotting Sasuke, who was carrying Sakura in a piggyback. Sasuke was looking extremely shocked and confused. He did not know what or how to make sense out of this. What the hell was that? Naruto panicked for a second, but then got a grip and replied, a kiss, what else could it be? He turned around to go and gather his kunai, but Sasuke stopped him again. No. I mean, why did she kiss you? Naruto turned around with a frown. I don't know what goes on in her head. But what the hell are you doing here? Weren't you supposed to take Sakura and head back to safety? This time, Sasuke surprised Naruto by looking abashed of all things. He muttered something unintelligible, causing Naruto to raise an eyebrow. Sorry, couldn't hear you. Come again. I said I couldn't leave you behind, okay. Sasuke snapped, a hint of red on his cheeks. Naruto snorted and walked past the boy. It's rare to see you worry about someone else. But don't worry about me. As long as you have that kunai with you, I can flash to you anytime. Naruto suspected Sasuke had taken the kunai not so Naruto could flash to him, but to decipher the secret behind it. Sasuke wasn't an idiot. He obviously had noticed it in his fight with Gaara what he used the kunai for, and he wanted the jutsu for himself. Too bad for him. In his notes, Minato had written down that he had taken the jutsu to levels that were seemingly impossible. He had developed it so far that in fact, it almost became a sort of an artificial bloodline. A jutsu that could only be used by someone of his blood, that too counting in all the fuinjutsu processes that involved locking your chakra at each step. Sasuke mentally flinched at that. He forgot to take into account that Naruto could sense all of his kunai. He had to divert the topic fast before Naruto asks him to give it back. Why did you let them go? That question caught Naruto's attention as he picked the last of the Hiraishin kunai scattered on the ground. He slowly turned to face Sasuke. He opened his mouth to explain why, but stopped at the sudden rush of chakra in his system, as well as memories. What the hell? Sasuke watched curiously as Naruto's head snapped towards the direction of the stadium, a classic expression of, what the fuck, on his face. What is it? Naruto turned to face Sasuke, a sense of urgency on his face that wasn't there before. You need to get back to Kakashi, right now. He stepped forward, a hand outstretched, probably to send him to Kakashi. Sasuke stepped back. Whoa. You are not sending me back like that. Not until you tell me why. Naruto grit his teeth as more memories flowed into his mind. He did not have time for this. I can't tell you right now because someone close to me is in danger. How about this? I'll tell you once the invasion is over and you promise me, right now, that you won't tell a soul about this until I tell you so. Deal. Sasuke thought over it a bit and said, alright, but you better telephone. He wasn't allowed to finish as Naruto put a hand on his forehead and forcefully sent him back to where Kakashi was. He might have finished the enemies in the stadium by now. He flashed, and within 10 seconds, he had gathered every kunai that had been scattered in the area. After inspecting the clearing for one last time, he flashed again. Hold on Gigi. I'm coming. XXXXXXX Temari and Kankuro were supporting Gaara on each of his sides as they made their way back to Suna. With Gaara's defeat, the invasion was moot. Naruto made a good point about Gaara, she thought. They allowed Gaara to push them away, and her efforts had been clearly not enough to make him come back to her. Gaara had pushed them away as well. Their father, in hopes of strengthening Gaara as fast as he could, sent assassins to kill him. While none could get past his sand, Gaara still wanted to be close to them. However, something happened, and suddenly, Gaara became the cold person he was. He cared only about himself. She figured that the amount of killing attempts finally broke him, convincing that no one would care for him, or acknowledge his existence. Then Naruto came along and unlike anyone they had ever met, proceeded to beat Gaara into the ground until he was willing to hear what Naruto had to say. Temari knew that Naruto had changed Gaara's outlook on life permanently. She had witnessed hope in Gaara's life for the first time in years. Hope that he could make a life for himself like Naruto had did. Temari, Kankuro, a voice snapped her out of her thoughts. She turned her head to face Gaara, who was still not meeting her eyes. Kankuro shot a questioning look at his sister, but his confusion turned to shock when Gaara uttered a single word. Sorry. Both the older siblings were shocked that Gaara apologized to them. For years, Gaara viewed everyone as beneath him. For him to apologize, it meant Naruto's words had had a deep effect on him. Temari smiled. They were in Naruto's debt for this. It's okay, little brother. XXXXXXX Kakashi looked tiredly around the stadium. A large number of bodies were littered around almost in every part of the arena, either covered in blood or outright crushed. He blamed Guy for all of this. That man seemed to make everything a competition between them, and for some reason that even he doesn't know, Kakashi always indulged in those things. Guy had made a bet that he could kill more enemies than Kakashi. Kakashi, being the dutiful, eternal that he was, agreed to the bet. After almost an hour of continuous fighting, the enemy had finally stopped coming into the stadium. Guy was standing on the other side of the arena. He waved energetically at Kakashi. Yo, Kakashi. How much is your count? Is there an end to his youth? Kakashi tiredly thought, but answered anyway. 57, he answered in a bored tone. Just as he predicted, Guy shifted to a completely different personality. Oh Kakashi. It seems you have won again, my eternal rival. It was no secret in Konoha that he and Guy were eternal rivals. Kakashi was thankful for his face mask every time Guy chose to announce their rivalry publicly. That man had no sense of stealth whatsoever. People already questioned if he was mentally fit to be a ninja, it won't do for them to start questioning him as well. Kakashi mentally sighed. His best friend was a pain in the ass. Just as he was about to approach Guy, Sasuke suddenly appeared beside him, with Sakura unconscious on his back. Kakashi already had a kunai out ready, but lowered it once he saw who it was. He watched, amused, as Sasuke blinked, no doubt disoriented from the sudden travel, and proceeded to curse in a way that Kakashi almost blushed. Though he couldn't hold back the perverted giggle upon seeing his student's position. That asshole. I told him not to do that. Sasuke shouted before spotting Kakashi. He raised an eyebrow in deadpan upon hearing the perverted giggle. What is it? Kakashi was more than happy to point it out. I wonder what you plan on doing with her, Sasuke. Especially you are carrying her when she's unconscious. Sasuke blinked, not understanding the reference at first. Then he remembered that his sensei was a pervert, and then his face suddenly turned red. Don't make such useless assumptions, you perverted jerk. Kakashi refrained from commenting that this might be proof of a claim Naruto had made some time ago. He might be gay, after all. He then turned to face the purple barrier in which his leader was trapped. He could only hope that Sandame would manage to survive against his former student. XXXXXXX things were not going well for Hiruzen. Orochimaru had been right, he was not as strong as he was 10 years ago, let alone his prime. And it showed, his movements were slow, his chakra capacity, even though it hadn't deteriorated with age, he had a limit to what he could exert now. If he exerted more, his chakra coils were in danger of permanent damage. And don't even get him started on his old joints. He and Orochimaru engaged first in taijutsu, which rapidly progressed into ninjutsu. At one point, Hiruzen had even managed to corner his student again. With a smirk he had thought, looks like I still got it. Got it, his ass. Orochimaru had blocked his attacks by pulling up coffins of all things. From then on, it was no longer funny. In fact, Hiruzen was outraged that Orochimaru had the nerve and spine to do such a vile thing. Orochimaru had defiled the graves of both of his senseis. Hiruzen had watched with horror-filled eyes as Orochimaru opened the graves to allow the now resurrected Shodai and Nadaime Hokage to walk out. And they looked terrible. Both of their skin was deathly pale, as it was rightly so. Orochimaru had forcefully called the dead into the land of the living. Hiruzen had to stop himself from facepalming when the former Hokages finally opened their mouths to speak. Even though Hiruzen knew that Hashirama Sensei was a peculiar man, with his unusually boisterous and seemingly idiotic nature, it was Tobirama Sensei who knew Hiruzen the best. It was scary. How easily he could read his student. Hiruzen even suspected that Tobirama knew that he was a closet pervert, but he didn't really know, for the man never called him out on it. Only Hashirama knew of that fact, and even he had found out by accident. But enough of that. The first words that Hashirama Sensei had spoken were, "Is that you, Sarutobi?" It has been a long time. Hiruzen had cringed how much dead he had sounded. But somehow, that same tone from Tobirama didn't surprise him at all. In fact, it was all he could do from facepalming. You have gotten old, Saru. That man was always blunt like that. Turns out, it was an extremely vile jutsu that had been created by Tobirama. Edo Tensai was a jutsu that binds the soul of a deceased person to a living vessel, restoring the deceased as they were when they were alive in order to do their summoner's bidding. It was the ultimate insult one can give to the dead. Why Tobirama Sensei created this, he would never know. And how Orochimaru got a hold of this, that also he would never know. Ultimately, Hiruzen had no choice but to fight his former senseis. As the fight between them progressed, Hiruzen noted that while his opponents were certainly strong, they were nowhere near the level they were when they were alive. They were merely puppets that Orochimaru was controlling. Hiruzen would know, he was their prized student, after all. But even then, Hiruzen slowly found himself on the losing side of the battle as his age and lack of training in a long time slowly took a toll on him. Even after summoning Enma, who became an indestructible adamantine staff, he was put on the ropes by the Shaddai's mastery of Mokuden and Nadime's mastery of Sweden. Even if they were puppets, their teamwork was strong enough that Hiruzen was hard-pressed to just dodge those attacks. And if things weren't bad enough already, both the bodies of the former Hokages were seemingly indestructible. Any damage dealt to them was recovered from within seconds. This is bad. At this rate, I really would be killed. I cannot afford to let them escape this barrier. Konoha would never recover from being destroyed by its own creators, Hiruzen thought as he dodged Tobirama's attacks and used his staff to strike Hashirama in the face. He put some distance between him and both the Hokages with a large-scale Kaiden Jutsu. He then suddenly remembered what happened before they started fighting. Of course. How could I have forgotten that? Naruto gave me a scroll, saying that it had some reinforcements. I really could use a soldier pill right now. He set Enma loose on the Hokages, while he untied the scroll. As soon as he saw the slightly changed, but still recognizable prisoner containment seal, he was confused. Why would Naruto want to give him such a scroll right now? But he had not time to think over it as Enma came skidding back on his feet. Whatever you are doing, hurry up Sarutobi. Enma shouted in his gruff voice. Hiruzen wasted no more time and spread the scroll on the ground, pushing chakra into it, choosing to trust Naruto. And boy, Naruto knew exactly well what reinforcements are. Hiruzen stared dumbfounded at the army of blondes, no doubt shadow clones that Naruto created. He knew Naruto had a ridiculous amount of chakra, but this was a whole new level of absurd. He would have to re-evaluate the blonde, if he survived. Orochimaru was flabbergasted as to how did the old fool manage to pull this in the middle of the battle. Then he noticed the scroll in his hand. A prisoner containment scroll modified to seal shadow clones. And the look on his face means someone gave it to him. I don't need to be a genius to figure out who. But no matter, 100 shadow clones against 2 Hokages are nothing. They will only buy the old fool some time. Sadly, Orochimaru was only partially correct. The entire roof became a field for chaos within seconds. The changes that the first Hokage had made to the roof with his entire Mokuden only added to the clones' advantage as they took extreme pleasure in causing as much chaos as possible, with Flash Step and Hiraishin. Hiruzen grabbed this opportunity to rest and chuckled. This certainly was useful. But he could see that having shadow clones as back had its downfalls as well. The Hokages proved how formidable they were, for the clones started dispelling only 2 minutes after they were summoned. Hiruzen knew that this was bad, and there was no way he would be escaping today with his life. He sighed sadly as he thought about his life until today. He had made countless decisions, and just as many mistakes. He regretted what he was about to do, but there was no other option. And he was in no way calling Naruto to fight with him. Just as he was about to initiate the sequence for the jutsu that would seal the dead away, a clone flashed beside him. With so many flashes going around, Hiruzen wasn't even surprised. This backup is going to get destroyed in just 10 seconds, he said testily, watching with growing nervousness as only 20 of them remained now. Hiruzen nodded gravely. When you dispel, pass on my thanks to Naruto. I regret that I won't be escaping alive today. The clone looked at him with a surprised face. Another peculiar thing that Hiruzen had discovered was that each of Naruto's clones had a different personality. One was happy to the point of being goofy, one was lazy, one was an angry one, and there was one that was exactly like Naruto, which was the one thing that he found weird. Considering shadow clones are meant to be the user's exact copies, finding an exact copy among Naruto's different ones was certainly a new experience. This one seemed prone to be surprised every now and then. He wanted to say something, but words seemed to fail him as he could only close and open his mouth repeatedly. He then sighed, and Hiruzen found his worry growing as a determined look came onto his face. If you say that you have no choice, then I'm afraid I have no choice as well. The last clone besides the one was dispelled, and Hiruzen dropped into a stance again, holding Enma. This was his final stand, and he would be damned if he let Orochimaru win. Just as he was about to commence his attack, he saw the last clone beside him making a half-rammed seal, dispelling a second later. What was he up to? He suddenly got a very bad feeling in his stomach. Surely he was not going to. His worst fears were confirmed when in a flash of blue, the Prime himself arrived. With a cocky smirk on his face, no less. Am I late or what? XXXXXXX. The Anbu standing outside were dumbstruck upon seeing Uzumaki Naruto. It was one thing to see his performance in the matches against two very formidable genin, it was a whole another thing to see him face off against Orochimaru of the Sannin. Naruto could easily take out an A-rank jonin with what he did in the matches, and the Anbu were willing to bet that what they saw was not even half of what Naruto was truly capable of. But Orochimaru was no ordinary A-rank opponent. A high S-rank shinobi trained personally by the Sandaime Hokage, he was no joke of an opponent at all. To say the atmosphere was tense was the understatement of the decade. What is he doing? And Anbu barely kept from shouting. The captain narrowed his eyes behind his mask and replied, there is no doubt that Uzumaki Naruto and the Sandaime share a close bond. The reinforcements he provided him were the proof of that, if you can even call them that. In addition to that, Naruto had successfully anticipated a personal attack on Hokage-sama and prepared accordingly. Now that I think about it, it doesn't surprise me that he was alerted of the battle due to the memories of the numerous Kage Bunshin. One of them must have sent a message to him to personally come here. But he still is just a genin standing in a field of Kage-level shinobi. He would. I think that it is well established by now that Uzumaki Naruto is not an ordinary shinobi at all, the captain calmly refuted. Turning back to the fight, he said in almost a whisper, we just have to trust him. XXXXXXX. Naruto carefully eyed Orochimaru as he slowly shifted into a stance. This was his second time battling the Sannin, and this time, he won't be pulling anything against him. He could not afford to. However, he had to know something first. Why did you do it? Orochimaru was also not quite surprised by Naruto's appearance. His shadow clones must have relayed everything that happened. He used his control on the Edo Tensei to pull back the two Hokage for now. Who knows, he might learn something interesting. Why did I do what? Naruto's eyes narrowed in anger. Don't play games with me. Why did you defile the graves of the previous Hokage? You could have easily matched Hokage-sama, even beaten him, considering he's far from his prime. Orochimaru chuckled, amused by the anger in front of him. I only found it fitting, and a little ironic that the people responsible for the birth of this village will also be responsible for its death, along with the Aikibi. Naruto felt rage building within him, but he ruthlessly pushed it back. Now was not the time to lose his mind. I've already received memories of my clones. They did keep you a bit busy, but in the end, they are just clones who can get dispelled in just one hit. So I'll ask you this, what makes you think we'll just let you do what you want? Orochimaru felt a bit of anxiousness creep into him, like something bad was going to happen. Nonetheless, he didn't let this show on his face, keeping up his amused facade. You really think you have what it takes to stop me? Edo Tensei has no exploitable weakness as far as anyone knows. I am the only one who knows how to use it in the first place. Naruto smirked, despite the situation he was in. Be that as it may, you've already lost, Orochimaru of the Sannin. I've already sent the Aikibi running with its tail between his legs. This fact surprised both Orochimaru and Hiruzen. Hiruzen asked him with shock, the Aikibi has been defeated. Naruto gave him a side glance, of course. I wouldn't be here if he wasn't. Orochimaru found himself growing annoyed. Using Gaara as his weapon was a major part of his plan. To think Naruto managed to defeat him and still have energy left to fight him. He is quickly becoming a pain. He not only manages to defeat Gaara, thereby foiling my invasion by a good margin, but he even gave the old fool some reinforcements that I didn't even know of. If I don't take care of him now, he'll become a full-blown annoyance for me in the future, the snake summoner thought with a frown. Time to end this battle. Be that as it may, he mocked the young Uzumaki, you can't hope to match the might of the Hokages just yet. Maybe in the future, but only if you live through today. With that, he commanded. Naruto chuckled as he pulled out his own scroll, You should know better than that, you reptilian psychopath. Every jutsu has a weakness. He released the contents of the scroll, and Orochimaru had to fight a groan of annoyance upon seeing a very familiar sight. 100 grinning clones once again stood between the two sides of the battlefield. The Hokages halted a bit to reconsider on how to deal with this setback, but Orochimaru forced them to keep going. It's just the matter of finding it. With that, all the clones once again engaged the two cages with glee, using the advantages their predecessors set for them before they ran out. Naruto then turned to Hiruzen with a serious look on his face. Gigi, tell me what you know about this Edo Tensei. My clones weren't able to tell me much. I'll need everything you know to devise a counter against it. Hiruzen took a moment to study Naruto. With his eyes narrowed and his hair flowing in the wind, Hiruzen was once again reminded of Minato. Cold and calculative in battle, Minato had rarely lost against someone, and at his strongest, even Jiraiya had admitted that he could not defeat Minato. To think that his son would grow so powerful as to assist the Hokage in one of his battles, right after defeating a tailed beast. It would be injustice if he were to be promoted to Chunin. Very well. And while the clones did their best to keep the cages and Orochimaru busy, Hiruzen told what he had studied from the Forbidden Scroll and witnessed firsthand. Just as all the clones were once again demolished, Naruto had everything he needed to know. He was now looking at Orochimaru with a predatory smile which was frankly, a bit unnerving. It's a summoning jutsu. You don't say. Before he could act on his plan, he and Hiruzen were surprised when suddenly, Tobirama decided to speak. Whatever you have planned, don't waste time in executing it. Hiruzen blinked a few times. Nadime-sama, I thought you were under control. He dodged and blocked the dead Hokage's attacks while exchanging words. He only can control my actions, but not my personality. Even though we are compelled to obey his orders, that doesn't mean we can't think and talk for ourselves. And why the hell would you decide to train a student such as that? Hiruzen sighed as Hashirama, who had decided to engage Naruto, himself jumped into the conversation. As always, he was highly eccentric. Naruto called out to his Gigi, just keep him busy, Gigi. I have a way to stop them from attacking. Hiruzen grit his teeth and snapped back, what do you think I have been doing all this while? Naruto turned back to his fight. He was exchanging blows with the Shodai, more like dodging and flipping, was evaluating his position in this fight. With all the cage bunshin gone, my chakra capacity is roughly a bit more than a third of my actual reserves. Gigi told me that on top of having monstrous reserves of chakra, both the Senju brothers have an unlimited supply of it in their current state. But they are not fighting at full strength, which means we still have a chance. Naruto substituted with a clone seamlessly in the middle of his fighting. However, Hashirama had decades of battle experience. It was foolish to hope that it could have fooled him. As soon as he detected the switch, he immediately dispelled the clone and turned his attention back to the original, only to find a ball of wind racing towards him. Fuden. Kei's Gyorai no Jutsu. Naruto watched as the legendary cage simply backflipped to dodge the highly explosive jutsu. However, he failed to take notice of the seal on the sleeve of his left hand. Just as Hashirama completed his flip, Naruto was no longer in his vision. He let his instincts take over as he turned around to kick Naruto away, but he suddenly found he couldn't move. Combined with his awkward position of a leg high in the air, he toppled face first into the tiles of the roof. Curiously enough, there was a large, goofy smile on his face. Ho! You managed to paralyze me, young leafling. Naruto was lightly panting as he gazed down at Hashirama, a modified Uzumaki paralysis seal. Complete lockdown of motor functions and cannot be overloaded with chakra, which I'm sure you have no small amount of. Surprisingly, Hashirama outright laughed. To be honest, Naruto did not know what to make of the first Hokage. While he had his own vision of the Shodai Hokage, he had never imagined him to be a goofy idiot. And he was pretty sure he wasn't the only one who thought so when the aforementioned cage was alive. It was completely undignified for someone who is called the god of shinobi. Hashirama joyfully replied, not every day I meet someone of your age who can catch me off guard like this. The will of fire burns brightly in you, I see. Naruto bowed, thank you for your compliment, Shodai-sama. But the fight is not over yet. He made a shadow clone, who took up guard beside a curious Hashirama. Just be ready for it when it happens. If he wasn't bound, Hashirama would have given a thumbs up with a large grin. Seeing he was bound, he just grinned, not even knowing what Naruto was talking about. Will do. With that, Naruto turned his sights onto the jackpot, Orochimaru. Without any further thought, he flash-stepped, barreling his right fist right into Orochimaru's jaw. Orochimaru was thoroughly enjoying himself. He had sent the Shodai to dispose of the meddlesome Uzumaki, while he teamed up with Tobirama to take Hiruzen down. It was actually quite amusing to hear the legendary water user curse at him, while attacking his own successor. He was about to use an opening Tobirama had created to stab his sensei with the famed sword of Kusanagi, when he was suddenly punched in the face so hard he swore his teeth might have loosened a bit. He went flying back, though he managed a flip in the air and land gracefully on his feet. He looked up and grit his teeth in annoyance. Naruto was standing right before him, kunai held in reverse grip and wind chakra flowing through them. How are you standing before me? You should have been killed by the Shodai. Naruto smirked. I don't see why you need to know. He then disappeared in a flash step, and Orochimaru blocked the swipe at his throat at the last second. Both settled in a furious bout of taijutsu, each trying to overpower the other. Orochimaru knew not to underestimate Naruto in any way, while Naruto knew that he needed to end this as quickly as possible. He delivered a series of punches that were blocked, but pushed Orochimaru back enough for Naruto to execute a move of his own. He front flipped with legs split at 180-degree angle. Orochimaru blocked the first leg with both of his hands, but the second leg came crashing down on his head painfully, causing him to kiss the roof. Orochimaru groaned as he rubbed his head to quell the pain. If he hadn't been suffering blows like that from Tsunade a long time ago, he would have been seeing stars. While Naruto didn't have Tsunade's monstrous strength, the speed he used to augment his attacks made them no less formidable. His eyes opened wide in alarm as he suddenly saw that Naruto was nowhere in sight. All of a sudden, he was forced to weave in between four shadow clones that had suddenly appeared from nowhere. One swipe of his sword took care of the first, the second was kicked out of existence, the third managed to poke a pressure point on his arm that made it go numb, but he was managed as well. The last one attempted an upward slash, only to see that he would be stabbed before he could slash the Sannin. So using his slower perception, he let go of the Hiraishin kunai just as he was stabbed in the back. It was almost like slow motion for Orochimaru as he watched the kunai spin upwards. His own free hand reached up in slow motion to grab the kunai before it was too late. Oh, too late. Naruto suddenly appeared mid-air, in perfect position, grasping the kunai by its handle and delivering a direct, blazing palm thrust on Orochimaru's back. The attack was way too fast for Orochimaru to counter and was therefore, bashed into the roof once again. Naruto flashed to the kunai a few meters away. As Orochimaru slowly recovered from the attack, Naruto took a glance to see how Gigi was doing. Not good. He will have to be extremely quick. Hiruzen was heavily panting. He was running low on chakra, and even Tobirama could see that. So exhausted he was, that coupled with his old age, he was starting to get dizzy. He tripped on one of the uprooted tiles and fell back, simply unable to continue anymore. He could do nothing but watch as Tobirama picked up a stray kunai and rushed towards him. Hiruzen closed his eyes as he waited for the end. Rather sad that he would die by his sensei's hand rather than an enemy's. For all his speed, it seemed Naruto was a bit late. Sorry Naruto, but this is the end. Seconds passed, and Hiruzen was confused. He should have been stabbed in the heart by now by his sensei. Opening one eye, he saw that Tobirama's hand had stopped an inch from his heart. Tobirama himself was looking surprised as to what just happened. He slowly reeled back, clenching and opening his fist to confirm for himself if this was really happening. It seems that I have gained back the control of my body, he analyzed before looking over to where his brother was. A clone over there was pressing a hand to Hashirama's back, releasing some sort of paralyzing seal. Hashirama grinned as he shot up to his feet, testing the movement of his limbs. So this is what he was talking about. I have to say, I never predicted this. Tobirama turned back to see just what had happened, that they were out of Orochimaru's control, only to see a deep gash on Orochimaru's right side, with blood flowing from it like waterfall. The Sannin was pressing the wound as tight as he could to slow the blood flow down. Just a second later, his mouth opened widely and another Orochimaru crawled out of it, without any injuries. He had a snarl on his face, but the damage was already done. I can't believe you just did that. Naruto just grinned at his victory. Looks like you just weren't fast enough. What just happened here? Tobirama questioned with authority. Naruto grinned as he recounted what happened moments before. 30 seconds back, Orochimaru stood up as he leveled a death glare at Naruto. The boy had landed way too many hits. There was no doubt that he was skilled and talented, but this was frankly ludicrous. Even he couldn't match Sarutobi-sensei when he was that young. But then again, he didn't know the Hiraishin. He teleported to the kunai in the air. I should never have let my guard down after dismissing those clones. Your efforts are admirable, he rasped out, but ultimately useless. This is a jutsu that not even the Yondaime could have found the weakness to. All you are trying to do is delay the Inavi. He never got the chance to finish his monologue as Naruto suddenly appeared in front of him. He placed one hand on his stomach, the right, while the other holding the kunai went right into Orochimaru's side, drawing a surprised grunt from then man. One moment he was standing in front of Orochimaru, the next moment, instant, he was burying a kunai into him. Hiraishin no jutsu. He must have marked me in that attack. Orochimaru thought as he released a breath in pain as the kunai went deeper. Even the Yondaime. Police, Naruto mocked, he would have ended this fight ages ago. Orochimaru felt a burst of chakra down where Naruto's palm was and looked down, his face morphing into horror as he realized what had happened. A contract seal. What are you? Before he could finish his sentence, Naruto slashed the kunai sideways, right out of the screaming Sanin's body and drawing a huge amount of blood, along with some chunks as well. He then flashed back before Orochimaru could retaliate. Flashback over. Naruto grinned as he neared the end of his explanation. Gigi told me that you summoned the Hokages from the dead. The fact was further cemented when I learned the full name of this jutsu. Kuchiyos. Edo Tensai is a jutsu that puts the summoned soul in a contract with the summoner to do their bidding. So I simply cancelled that contract with a contract seal, which removes any form of direct control a summoner has over any summon. Tobirama smirked as a pleased grunt escaped his throat, to know the Hiraishin and Fuinjutsu at such a young age and apply it in combat. It's good to know that the future of the leaf is in hands such as these. What is your name? Naruto straightened up while keeping Orochimaru in sight. Uzumaki Naruto, Nadaime-sama. Who taught you the Hiraishin? I learned it from my father's notes, Nadaime-sama. Tobirama raised an eyebrow. I see. Then he turned towards Orochimaru with a menacing expression. Both he and Hashirama started walking towards the now nervous man, cracking their knuckles. So you were going to use us to destroy the village we built. You have some nerve. Tobirama added as well, don't think you can escape. We are no longer under your control. Both of them rushed at Orochimaru, who knew that there was no way he could do anything. The cages were out of his control by a contract seal, which meant that he could not even cancel the jutsu. Which left only one option. Lower the barrier. We are leaving. Hi Orochimaru-sama. The barrier was lowered, and Orochimaru turned to escape when suddenly, Naruto flashed in front of him and kicked him right in the face. He went tumbling back on the roof, coming to a harsh stop. He immediately got back up, but there was no way he was able to counter what came next in time. Kaden. Ruka no Jutsu. Orochimaru had no time to mold enough chakra for a counter, so he just brought his hands forward in a cross position. He screamed in pain as the concentrated fire utterly burnt his arm, even from the inside. Only when the fire stopped was he able to jump back. Only years of building up his pain tolerance allowed him to not pass out right on the roof. My arms. He mentally raged. They were burnt right to the inside, and even trying to move his little finger sent painful jolts up his arms. And he won't be able to change his body for almost 4 months. I'll get you for this, Uzumaki Naruto. The Sannin fled the battlefield, arms and pride injured and objective failed. He had never foreseen that he would be defeated by a mere genin, much less the Hokage. The only comfort that he could take that Uzumaki Naruto was no mere genin, and even that wasn't much comforting. Down the road, Orochimaru would have to watch out for him. XXXXXXX, and there he goes again, Naruto muttered as he saw Orochimaru vanish into the ground. I'm surprised that someone managed to get their hands on that jutsu, Tobirama commented while looking at Naruto with his hands folded. He looked every bit the Hokage he was known to be. Hashirama on the other hand. Tobirama, I told you that it wasn't a great jutsu, he said with a hand running down his face. Tobirama turned an annoyed face to his older brother. Will you be quiet, Anija? I'm trying to talk to this genin. But shut up. It was almost comical how quickly the god of shinobi could fall into depression. As soon as Tobirama asked Osa politely for his elder brother to shut up, a cloud of rain appeared above Hashirama's head. Naruto chose to ignore the bickering of the brothers and went to check up on the old Hokage, who was now sitting up and watching the bickering with a nostalgic smile. Naruto couldn't think of anything to say, so he just sat down beside him. Were they always like that? Hiruzen chuckled. Always. Their antics never failed to amuse me. But that is what them so great. Naruto tilted his head. What do you mean? Hiruzen gave a cryptic smile. You'll understand in time. Naruto huffed, muttering about old men and their elusive ways of talking. Hiruzen chuckled and patted Naruto on his back. I have to say, you sure do live up to your title, the most unpredictable ninja of Konoha. I expected some extra weapons or, considering it was your clone who gave it to me, some really good fuinjutsu traps. Boy, you almost gave me a heart attack when I saw the 100 Bunshin standing like some sort of army. Naruto chuckled and rubbed his head. What can I say? I didn't know what kind of attack you would be involved in, so I just did the first thing that came to mind. Hiruzen laughed and said, it was excellent, and worth seeing the look of bafflement on my former student's face. But seriously Naruto, I have to commend you. You not only displayed the true characteristics of a shinobi in battle, but you were smart enough to figure out how to counter the Edo Tensei in just minutes, while even I couldn't. Naruto blushed a little at the praise and was about to say something when an incredulous voice interrupted their conversation. Did you say, 100 shadow clones? Both of them turned to see Hashirama with a look of wonder on his face as he approached with his brother. Naruto nodded. Hi, Shodai-sama. Hashirama gave a sly look to Tobirama. That's way more than you were able to do, Tobirama. And he is still just a child. Tobirama grit his teeth, restraining himself from whacking the idiot across the head. Cooling down a bit, he turned to Naruto. You said you were from the Uzumaki clan, did you not? I don't see any red hair, so the blonde must come from your father. And while I knew that Uzumaki possessed chakra reserves large enough to best even the Senju, even the strongest Uzumaki could only make 50 at best. Naruto slowly nodded. It was a fair assessment. If it helps you any, I am the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi. Both of the previous Hokages were surprised, but not that much. Then it's understandable. After all, only the Uzumaki had life force and chakra strong enough to jail the demon, Tobirama mused to himself. Then suddenly remembering something, he turned to the aged Hokage. What are you doing holding that hat in your old age, Sarutobi? Shouldn't you have found a successor by now? Hiruzen cringed at the reminder of the death of his successor. I did, sensei. But he died shortly after taking the hat. Kyuubi killed him, but he was able to seal it into Naruto here before he died. Hashirama finished with a frown. I don't know what to say about this. On one hand, the Yondaime did a great deed by sacrificing himself to save the village, but on the other hand, he passed a great burden onto you, Naruto. Hiruzen looked at Naruto, who frowned in thought. After a moment of thought, he said. Well, he couldn't ask anyone else in Konoha to give their child if he wasn't willing to do it himself. Understanding immediately lit up in their eyes. The Yondaime was your father, wasn't he? Naruto gave a proud smile and a nod, that he was. He was also your true successor, Nadaime-sama. Tobirama raised an eyebrow in question. Oh. How so? Naruto explained. He took your jutsu, the Hiraishin, to levels that even you wouldn't have been able to. He was known as Konoha's Yellow Flash. Hiruzen reprimanded Naruto for speaking to his sensei like that. Naruto. Naruto just gave a shrug, just stating the facts, Hokage-sama. Surprisingly, Tobirama wasn't insulted at all at Naruto's praise of his father. In fact, he chuckled. He did that. Good for him then, for I always knew that that jutsu could be refined to become better. If he was able to improve it to such a level, then I hope you surpass him as well. It is the inevitable duty of the future generation to surpass the old one. Hiruzen was smiling like it was the best day of his life. Chatting with his senseis right now felt like the old, peaceful days when he was still training under them. But as much as he enjoyed it, there was work to be done. For one, how to release the jutsu of Orochimaru. Since Naruto negated the control from him, they became nothing more than zombies in the living world. As much as I enjoy talking with you like the old days, please tell me you have a way of releasing this jutsu, sensei. Tobirama scoffed, of course I do. The mere fact that you doubt me is insulting. I had thought of the possibility that a revived soul might escape the control of the summoner, so I created a contingency plan. Anija, follow my hand signs. Hashirama, who was gazing at his village with a sad smile, turned and nodded. With one last look, he walked back to his brother. Just before he started to follow the signs, he turned to Naruto and said, Naruto, in our short fight, I have seen the great potential that you hold. See to it that you don't waste it, and give a shot at the seat of the Hokage if you want to. You know, change the world, bring peace to it. That was my dream when I was Hokage. You have my full blessings. Naruto bowed deep, thank you, Shodai-sama. Then he grinned cockily and said, and I already have my eyes on the hat, Shodai-sama. No one can snatch the position of the Rokudime from me. Hashirama laughed at the enthusiasm, while Tobirama smiled at it. Naruto reminded him just how his elder brother used to be when they were children. Optimistic at every turn, but serious when needed. Good to know, Naruto. We will be watching, and we look forward to see how you fare. Naruto brightened up like a sun on hearing that. Even though he didn't outright say it, Tobirama had given his blessings to him as well. Even Hiruzen took an opportunity to ask a question that he had wanted the answers to for a long time. Hashirama-sensei, Tobirama-sensei, will you please tell me how you managed your paperwork when you became Hokage? His questions triggered reactions that were completely astonishing. He had expected them to look a little in pain about the paperwork, but instead they just gave him pitiful looks. As if paperwork was the least of their problems during their reign as Hokage. You really haven't figured out after all this time? Hashirama asked a bit incredulous. Hope blossomed in Hiruzen. That means you know how to tackle it, sensei. Hashirama smiled and was about to tell him when. Don't tell him, Anija. If he couldn't figure it out on his own, then he's a failure as my student and Hokage. That had the effect of sending Hiruzen into a bout of depression that Hashirama was so familiar with. Hashirama flinched as he saw his student with a rain cloud on his head. Is this how it feels to see me do that? Sensei was still so cruel. Don't worry, Hokage-sama. If you want, I can tell it to you, Naruto offered. Hiruzen looked up with a gape. How do you know about it? Tobirama butted in with his usual snide remark. You ought to be ashamed of yourself if you can't figure out an answer that a genin like Naruto can. Naruto chuckled sheepishly as he rubbed his head. Just as the two brothers started the hand signs, Naruto remembered something he always wanted to know, Shodai-sama. Hashirama paused and looked at Naruto with raised eyebrows. Shooting a quick apologetic look to the annoyed Nadime, he said, do you mind if I ask you a question about your Mokuden? Hashirama grinned and dropped his hands to his hips, as if he was proud of speaking that subject. Sure. I can take a question before going. While your Mokuden is highly regarded throughout the shinobi world as a legendary bloodline, how is it that only you possess it and not any of your descendants? Hashirama became unusually serious all of a sudden, prompting Naruto to think that he might have overstepped his boundaries. Even Hiruzen looked a bit alarmed at how personal the question was, while Nadime was eerily calm. All of a sudden, Hashirama opened his eyes and with all seriousness, he exclaimed. I don't know. This time, Naruto really did faceplant as Hashirama started laughing like the goof he was. Hiruzen chuckled as well, while Tobirama finally couldn't hold it anymore and whacked his brother across the head, hard. Let's go already. With that, they finally began the hand signs. After a total of 24 hand signs that Naruto carefully memorized for the future, the souls finally left and returned to where they belonged. What a day! Naruto exclaimed with a big grin. Hiruzen sighed and took out a notepad to write one last thing in it. He outed back before Naruto noticed it. Naruto turned to him and asked with hopeful eyes. So, do I qualify for Chunin, Gigi? Hiruzen outright laughed at the adorable childlike look Naruto got in his eyes. It was rare to see it nowadays. Patience is a virtue, Naruto. He could finally relax. The invasion was over, and Konoha had survived.